Chapter 1346. The bell of creation rang above his head, and Lin Feng walked out of the Xintian time realm grotto heaven. Wang Lin was waiting outside, and he bowed to Lin Feng. Lin Feng said, "Summon Tianquan here. I originally planned to help her spread the news after you returned. Now that the grand heavenly immortal realm has happened, we should still announce it. It's just that she might be tied up for the sake of the grand heavenly immortal realm. I'm afraid it'll be unfair to her." Wang Lin replied, "Master, there's no need to worry. With Tianquan's personality, she doesn't mind." It was the same for him. Lin Feng nodded and flicked his finger. A stream of light flew into the void, and along with the melodious sound of the bell, it spread out on the peak of Jade Capital Mountain. Previously, the Divine Land was not peaceful either. A rumor quickly spread among the human cultivation world in the vast land of the Divine Land. At first, it was only spread in a small area, but in a very short time, it almost spread to the entire Divine Land. In Xianmen Tianzong, there existed a Yuta beast. It wasn't a captive, but a Yuta beast that could move freely. It was even enlightened by the master of the Celestial Gate. What was even more shocking was that this Yuta beast was the son of the first wife of Yu Huang Tianhai in the past. Yu Huang Tianhai was one of the three great demons in the history of the Great Heaven Primordial World. He was the strongest person in the current era, and he ruled over Tianwang Vast Land. He ruled over the Divine Land. In this war between the two worlds, the Yudu race that had returned to the Great Thousand World and almost brought a calamity to the human cultivation world of the Divine Land. Their entire race's strength wasn't even comparable to Yo Huang's in the past. Her son actually entered Xianmen Tianzong and even received guidance from the master of the Celestial Gate to cultivate the Tao. When the news spread out, the entire Divine Land was instantly shaken. Similarly, waves of shock swept through Tianwang Vast Land. Everyone was discussing it, trying all sorts of ways to verify it. As time passed, in everyone's eyes, the most powerful proof was the silence of Yudu clan. It was as if they were admitting it in shame. On the Divine Land, the human forces were all bewildered. However, it was not convenient for them to go to Xianmen Tianzong to seek confirmation. Therefore, they could only try to beat around the bush. Right at that moment, the bell of creation on Mount Jade Capital in the Kunlun mountain range suddenly rang, resounding through the heavens. When the war between the two worlds had just ended, when Lin Feng was bestowing honorific titles on his personal disciples, he had said, "With this ceremony, the bell of creation will ring 16 times. Future generations will bear witness, and it will be a symbol of the sect throughout the ages." It was also at that time, when the mountain gate was opened, that he established the rules and etiquette for Xianmen Tianzong. From then on, whenever the founding master personally bestowed honorific titles on the disciples of the sect, the bell of good fortune would ring 16 times. The bell of good fortune rang from 1 to 7 times as a greeting ceremony. Depending on the identity of the guest, the first ring was the lowest, and the 7th ring was the highest. When the bell of good fortune rang 8 times, it meant that a grand ceremony was being held within the sect. All the disciples of the sect, regardless of whether they were inheriting the legacy or laying the foundation, would gather together. When the bell of good fortune rang 9 times, it meant that the founding master, Lin Feng, would personally host the grand ceremony within the sect. When the bell of good fortune rang 9 times, it was usually used as a greeting ceremony and for the internal affairs of the sect. However, once it rang more than 9 times, it meant that Xianmen Tianzong had something to announce to the world. At that moment, in the sky above the Kunlun mountain range, a large illusory scene of light and shadow appeared. It distorted and erased the barriers and boundaries of time and space, causing most people on the Divine Land to be able to see the images that appeared in the illusory scene of light and shadow. In the light and shadow, there was a vast bronze bell. It was full of contradictory feelings. At first glance, it felt extremely small as a speck of dust. However, at the next glance, it felt extremely huge, so huge that it covered the heavens. A strange feeling filled everyone's mind. When they stared at the bell, it was as if they saw the most primordial chaos. Then, as the bell rang, the primordial chaos transformed into the primitive universe. Then, billions of stars were born and destroyed, and everything in the world was formed. Countless lives were born and then disappeared. That was Lin Feng's bell of good fortune. As the bell rang, everyone calmed down from their initial shock. Then, they began to silently count the bell's tolls. 23, 24, 25. 25 tolls. When the bell stopped, everyone's heart trembled slightly. 25 tolls. Does that mean that one of the inheritors of Xianmen Tianzong has reached the primordial soul realm? Everyone's expressions were different. Among the 8 inheritors of Lin Feng, all of them had reached the primordial soul realm. At that moment, the bell of good fortune had rung 25 times. That meant everyone looked at the illusory realm of light and shadow. They saw a purple-clothed young man standing under the mystic sky treasure tree at the top of the Jade Capital Mountain. He was the master of the celestial gate, Lin Feng. Beside Lin Feng stood a white-haired young man with a calm and indifferent expression. He was Lin Feng's third disciple, Wang Lin, the Supreme High Holiness. In front of Lin Feng and Wang Lin stood a woman. This woman looked to be in her 20s. She was tall and slender with snow-white skin. Her appearance was cold and elegant, and her long black hair fell down her back to her waist. Her lips were much lighter than ordinary people's. Her face was extremely pale, and her eyes were deep. The leaders of the human forces in the divine land all changed their expressions slightly when they saw this woman. They all knew this woman. Even if some of them hadn't seen her face to face, they could still recognize her. She was Wang Lin's inheritor, Dao Yuding. Because she had started cultivating earlier and joined the sect earlier, she had always been the person with the highest realm among the second-generation inheritors of Xianmen Tianzong. At the same time, she was also very proud of her supernatural powers and was good at fighting and killing. In the previous war between the two realms, she had killed a great sage of the Demon Clan with her late-stage Yuanine cultivation base. Her glorious battle achievements were ranked first among the second-generation inheritors of the Celestial Gate, and the cultivators of other forces were also surprised. However, this wasn't the reason why everyone's expressions changed. What shocked them was that Dao Yuding's supernatural power was vast and ethereal, and she seemed to be one with heaven and earth. Apparently, she had successfully reached the primordial soul realm. Although they could tell that Dao Yuding had just reached the primordial soul realm, everyone felt dizzy. There was actually someone among the second-generation inheritors of Xianmen Tianzong who had reached the primordial soul realm. Before this, there were no signs to speak of. This sudden strike really made everyone in the vast land of China dizzy and disoriented. Unlike Lin Feng's direct disciples like Xiao Yin and Zhu Yi, this was a powerhouse in the primordial soul realm among Lin Feng's disciples' generation. The difficulty of the primordial soul realm surpassed the difficulty of all the previous cultivation levels combined. Once this step was taken, there would be a huge difference between man and heaven. Crossing the boundary between man and heaven, one would be reborn, and one would be able to live a long life. There were countless Yuanine cultivators who were stuck at 3,600 years of lifespan. When their lifespan came to an end, they could only fall in despair and turn into dust. The Thunderbolt Sword sect lost a new primordial soul realm swordsman, Ben Lazy, in a war between the two worlds. This caused everyone, including the Thunderbolt Sword Venerable, to vomit blood. For many years, there had not been a single primordial soul realm cultivator. When Ben Lazy finally emerged, he died in the hands of the Demon Clan, causing the entire Thunderbolt Sword sect to be extremely depressed. The Sun Moon Sword sect's glorious Sun Sword Venerable had been waiting for a new Moonlight Sword Venerable for thousands of years. Chu Yang was born in Beyond Heaven Mountain. He was the second primordial soul realm cultivator after the founding ancestor of Beyond Heaven Mountain. Since the death of that ancestor, Beyond Heaven Mountain which had once fought with the wind god sect for the control of the southern foot of Kunlun Mountain, could only rely on him. In the battle of extermination, Xiao Yin and the other three had all reached the primordial soul realm in a short period of time, shocking the world. In this war between the two worlds, Lin Feng's remaining four disciples, Yu Hongyin, Luo Qingwu, Li Yuanfang, and Yang Qing, had also reached the primordial soul realm, attracting the attention of the world once again. All of Lin Feng's personal disciples had reached the primordial soul realm, shocking the world. Who would have thought that today, another primordial soul realm expert would appear among the direct descendants of Xianmen Tianzong? After the ceremony where Lin Feng conferred titles on Xiao Yin and the others, Dao Yuding returned to Yujing Mountain. After Wang Lin reported to Lin Feng, she went straight to the Xiantian Eternal Light cave to cultivate and finally came out recently. Among the second-generation true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, she was the first disciple to successfully reach the primordial soul realm. This scene made the crowd of primordial soul realm cultivators feel a burst of absurdity and disbelief. Since when did it become so easy to reach the primordial soul realm? The great Qin dynasty's Dao Master Chang'e raised his head slightly and recalled when he reached the primordial soul realm. At that time, his lifespan should have already exceeded 2,000 years. 2,544 years old. After experiencing countless failures, enduring countless hardships, and consuming countless resources, I finally succeeded. The gaze of the Celeritas' sword sex patriarch fell on Dao Yuding, and he tasted bitterness in his mouth. This year, he was already 1,400 years old, and the primordial soul realm still seemed far away. Even the road in front of him was full of fog, and he did not know how to move forward. If it was said that Xiao Yin and the other seven had all reached the primordial soul realm, then it would be fine. After all, their master was that big figure. But when a second-generation disciple like Dao Yuding also reached the primordial soul realm, it immediately made everyone feel that the world was not real. After all, her master, Wang Lin, reached the primordial soul realm. Calculating by the time of the vast thousand worlds, it was only a matter of 10 years or so. Even with the help of the heavenly cave, which accelerated the flow of time, 10 years in the vast thousand worlds for the cultivation world was also an extremely short time. And how many years had it been since Xianmen Tianzong established the sect? Lin Feng established Xianmen Tianzong not before some strong cultivators established the sect. When he was still a rogue cultivator, he had more than one generation of disciples, and it was already flourishing. Not only Dao Yuding, even his personal disciples, Yu Hongyin, Yang Qing, and the others, only formally entered the sect when it was established. In a short span of a few decades, Lin Feng and the celestial sect of wonders had risen together. At the same time, they were also crushing many conventions and common sense in the history of the Heaven Yuan Great World. Everything was crushed, leaving the world dumbfounded. In the scene of light and shadow, Dao Yuding slowly prostrated towards Lin Feng and Wang Lin. Then, with a turn of her body, she manifested a primordial spirit avatar, shedding her human form and transforming into the appearance of a Taiji diagram that blotted out the sky and earth. On the gigantic Taiji diagram, streams of ice sprayed out, transforming into streams of glaciers, a sea of ice. Lin Feng gently flicked his finger, and an ice-blue blade light fell on the Taiji diagram formed by Dao Yuding's primordial soul. It was a magic weapon. Tianquan, you're the first among the second-generation disciples to reach the primordial soul realm. This magic weapon is your reward. In the future, continue to cultivate. Chapter 1347. Dao Yuding's growth was guided by her master, Wang Lin. All kinds of opportunities, magic weapons, and elixirs were arranged by Wang Lin. Today, only this magic weapon, Gui Water Cold Saber, was given by Lin Feng as a reward for being the first among the second-generation disciples to reach the primordial spirit realm. This treasure originated from Lord Gui Water, who was suppressed by Lin Feng in the past. He occupied the East Sea's Flowing Waves Mountain after Lord Liobel left and intended to refine a magic weapon on the mountain. When he was only one step away from success, King Kuei Nio happened to return to Flowing Waves Mountain with Lin Feng and others, so he accidentally found what Lord Guei Water had done. After that, Sea Spirit Coal King and the Sea Spirit Coal Clan were rescued. Lord Guei Water was suppressed, and the magic weapon he refined also fell into the hands of Lin Feng. The quality of the magic weapon itself was good, and it was because of this treasure that Lord Guei Water returned to Flowing Waves Mountain. When it reached Lin Feng's hands, Lin Feng casually digested it and added some precious materials that Grand Emperor Guei Shui did not have the ability to obtain, completely refining this treasure and making the quality of this magic treasure go up another level. Even though it is a spirit-nurturing level magic treasure, its strength is extraordinary and the quality is outstanding. The treasures that Lin Feng gave to his disciples were always carefully considered. This Guei Water Cold Saber was quite compatible with Dao Yuding, and it was suitable for her to carry. The ice blue saber light fell into the Tai Chi diagram formed by Dao Yuding's primordial spirit, and then the glacier Tai Chi diagram turned in the void and turned back into Dao Yuding, standing in front of Lin Feng and Wang Lin. Dao Yuding bowed to Lin Feng and Wang Lin. Disciple thanks Patriarch for the treasure. Lin Feng said, "Cultivate hard. In the future, your supernatural power and Dharma power will be further improved, and there is Ice Spirit Cloud waiting for you." Dao Yuding nodded and replied, "Disciple thanks Ancestral Master and Master." She was very familiar with the Ice Soul Cloudy Mist. She had heard about it since she was young. It was the most powerful Dharma treasure in the Celestial Lake Sect after the Grand Ascension Stage Dharma treasure, the Twin Poles Sky Peak. Later on, when the Celestial Pool Sect was destroyed and the sect's elder, Elder Bing, was captured, the treasure fell into Lin Feng's hands. As time passed, Lin Feng finally subdued it. As far as Dao Yuding was concerned, most of the memories left by the Sky Pool sect were not pleasant. When Dao Yuding first joined the sect, she had a long conversation with the two poles of the Twin Poles Sky Peak, Apart from the parties involved, only Lin Feng and Wang Lin knew about the specific content of the conversation. The others, including Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, and the others, were not aware of it. Moreover, Lin Feng and Wang Lin were not present at the scene. However, what was certain was that the two poles of the Twin Poles Sky Peak would not force Dao Yuding. Otherwise, Lin Feng and Wang Lin would not agree to it. After that long conversation, Dao Yuding and the two poles of the Twin Poles Sky Peak seemed to reach some kind of consensus. From then on, Lin Feng and Wang Lin were the first to confirm that Dao Yuding would not become the first seat disciple of Wang Lin's mortal Lin Ju's second-generation direct disciple. Because of Dao Yuding's own wishes, Lin Feng and Wang Lin acquiesced to all of this. Otherwise, the two poles of the Twin Poles Sky Peak would not be able to force her. It was also from then on that Dao Yuding knew that the Ice Soul Cloudy Mist would be bestowed to her one day. It was already something that she had already decided on. And today, the Guei Water Cold Saber that Lin Feng had bestowed to her was her reward for being the first to attain the primordial soul realm. Looking at Dao Yuding, the cultivators of the human cultivation world in the Divine Land were slightly dazed. A second-generation disciple has also attained the primordial soul realm, compared to Xiao Yin, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, Shi Tianhao, and the others. Dao Yuding's attainment of the primordial soul realm naturally caused less waves. But that seemed to be a signal. The matter behind it was what made everyone shocked. Other than Dao Yuding, the second-generation true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong were Lin Tong, Tang Jun, Han Yang, Ing Luojia, Zhou Yinsong, Yang Tai, and Huang Jinting. Putting aside Dao Yuding, after her, the outstanding second-generation true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong would also begin to advance toward a whole new height. They would transform their deep potential, which shocked the world, into powerful strength. One by one, the experts of Xianmen Tianzong would rise, causing the strength of the entire Xianmen Tianzong to reach an astounding level. This scene was something that would make the cultivators of the other forces of the divine land feel dizzy just thinking about it. In the territory of the Great Zhou dynasty, the cultivators had already been scattered. Although they were still connected to each other, they were no longer a whole. At this moment, looking at Dao Yuding in the illusion of light and shadow, their hearts were filled with mixed feelings. They were all cultivators from the Tianqi sect in the past. After the destruction of the Tianqi sect, the sect's territory was occupied by the northern militant imperial court, and most of them were taken over by the Great Zhou dynasty. Thinking back to the scene of the Battle of Shilling City, and then looking at the current Xianmen, Tianzong, and Dao Yuding, these cultivators all felt as if it was a lifetime ago. Not to mention the Tianqi sect in the past, even the current Great Zhou dynasty could not be compared to Xianmen Tianzong at all. In a large city in the southern region of the Great Zhou dynasty, at this moment, there was a young man who was expressionlessly looking at the illusion of light and shadow in front of him. The young man had already successfully formed his nascent soul. As a Yuanning cultivator, everyone in the city respected him. However, there was no one else in the young man's eyes, only Dao Yuding in the illusion of light and shadow. This man was the successor of the Tianqi sect in the past, the direct disciple of the sect master Chao Wei, Song Qingyuan. In the past, he had a relationship with the woman who received the congratulations of the world in the illusion of light and shadow, but now that he thought about it, it was like a dream. He had brought that woman endless fear and nightmares. However, it seemed that in the eyes of Dao Yuding, he was already nothing. Not to mention nightmares, Dao Yuding didn't even have the interest to find him for revenge. On the contrary, in the many years after the Battle of West Hill City and the Kunlun Mountain Dharma Assembly, Song Qingyuan was first resentful and unwilling, then secretly terrified, and only gradually calmed down after many years. He had once attended the Kunlun Mountain Dharma Assembly. At that time, he discovered to his shock that Dao Yuding, who was at the middle stage of the Golden Elixir, had already surpassed him, who was still at the late stage of the Golden Elixir Dharma Assembly. Even though Dao Yuding didn't obtain first place in the Dharma Assembly, she had already surpassed him, who was still at the late stage of the Golden Elixir Dharma Assembly. Moreover, the rising momentum that Dao Yuding displayed left Song Qingyuan in the dust. The current Song Qingyuan had also successfully formed his nascent soul with the help of the Great Zhou dynasty in the past. Only he himself knew the hardships involved. However, when he looked at Dao Yuding again, the two of them were no longer people of the same world. Fate makes fools of people. Unexpectedly, such a thought arose in Song Qingyuan's mind. At the moment, he could no longer feel resentment and unwilling emotions. Instead, he felt more fortunate. Fortunate that Dao Yuding didn't come back to settle the score with him. Thinking about how fate makes fools of people and how the world is ever-changing, Song Qingyuan's gaze fell on the person in front of Dao Yuding. There was naturally no need to say much about Lin Feng. At the moment, Song Qingyuan looked at Wang Lin, and his emotions couldn't help but be somewhat complicated. Back when Dao Yuding was still in the Tianqi sect, the first time she became known to the world was during the Desolate Sea Dharma Assembly, and Wang Lin was actually the same. However, during that Desolate Sea Dharma Assembly, Wang Lin's cultivation was only at the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, while Dao Yuding was at the late stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. Who would have thought that the former would actually become the master of the latter, and now even single-handedly nurtured and taught the latter, and then witnessed the latter attaining the primordial soul realm? At that time, Song Qingyuan, who was already at the late stage of the Golden Elixir, now looked at them, but now he couldn't even look up to them. The huge gap was nothing more than that, and it made Song Qingyuan's emotions extremely complicated. At this moment, in the illusion of light and shadow, Wang Lin's calm gaze suddenly moved slightly, and his neck turned slightly. His gaze seemed to pass through the endless void, and he lightly glanced at Song Qingyuan. Song Qingyuan's whole body trembled, and he lowered his head, not daring to make eye contact with Wang Lin. After a long time, he let out a soft sigh. On Yujing Mountain, Dao Yuding put away the Gui water-cold saber, bowed to Lin Feng and Wang Lin, and then left. The group of Xianmen Tianzong disciples and people on the mountain all congratulated Dao Yuding. At this time, the powerful figures and powerhouses of the human cultivation world and the divine land also calmed down, nodded slightly, and ordered their disciples to go to Kunlun Mountain to congratulate her. Some of them even personally went to Kunlun Mountain. Although Dao Yuding was only a second-generation disciple in Xianmen Tianzong, she was now a real primordial spirit realm cultivator, and her status and strength were already not to be underestimated, especially Dao Yuding, who was a direct disciple of Xianmen Tianzong. Most likely, her strength could not be measured by the ordinary primordial spirit incarnation realm cultivators. First, there was her master Wang Lin and the others, and then there was her uncle master Yuhong Yin and the others. All of them proved this point again and again. Just when everyone thought that today's matter had ended, the bell of creation above Lin Feng's head rang again. Everyone looked at the illusion of light and shadow in shock. When they came back to their senses, they carefully counted the sound of the bell, and the result made them even more shocked. 36 rings. This time, the bell of creation sounded 36 rings. According to the etiquette of Xianmen Tianzong, the 36 rings of the bell of creation meant that the founder of Xianmen, Lin Feng, had accepted a disciple. It was not Xianmen Tianzong who had opened the mountain gate to accept disciples, but the master of Xianmen, Lin Feng, had accepted a personal disciple. Ever since Li Yuan Feng and Luo Qingwu, Lin Feng had never accepted another pro-disciple, and the pro-disciples he had accepted before were all the proud sons of heaven who shook the past and dazzled the present. The master of the celestial sect was full of heroes, and this was already a widely spread story in the vast land of the divine land. After the war between the two worlds, Lin Feng, who single-handedly turned the situation around with his sword, had attracted the attention of the world, let alone accepting disciples. The number of people who wanted to be his disciple was as many as the carps in the river, innumerable. Few people knew that the great Chanyu of the Northern Militant Royal Court had once begged for his own son to become a personal disciple of Lin Feng, but his wish had not been fulfilled. Becoming a personal disciple of the master of Xianmen Tianzong was also a great honor. Everyone knew that the master of Xianmen Tianzong never misjudged people, and those who were chosen by him, even if they were temporarily covered in dust, would definitely have something extraordinary. And after entering the sect, they would have a high status, a bright future, rich resources, and the top magical arts of the divine land. Now that Lin Feng was going to accept another personal disciple, how could the world not be shocked? For a moment, the entire divine land was silent, and everyone was staring at the illusion of light and shadow, wanting to see who was the lucky one who could reach the sky in one step. Chapter 1348. For a moment, everyone stared at the illusion of light and shadow, but no one else appeared except for Lin Feng and the Bell of Fate. At this time, Lin Feng said silently, "Today I am fortunate to have all my fellow Taoists bear witness that I will accept a new disciple." He turned around and gently knocked on the Bell of Fate. A jade token flew up from the Bell of Fate, on which the word Yao was engraved. His name is Daluo Yudu. Hearing this name, the people who were concentrating and looking solemn couldn't help but fall into a daze, unable to recover for a long time. In the tent of the Northern Militant Imperial Court, Northern Militant Prince Yu Xian twisted his neck stiffly and looked at his great Chanyu and High Priest. Daluo Yudu. This should be the name of a demon clan, right? Is it really a member of the Yudu clan? The Northern Militant, Great Chanyu, and High Priest looked at each other and smiled bitterly. The rumors that were spreading in the divine land were not only true, but also very conservative. The news that the master of the celestial sect of wonders had personally announced at this moment really surprised everyone. On the Luofu Immortal Island, He Kuangping and Huang Ming were both dumbfounded. In front of them, Dao Master Luofu, who had listened to their reports of what they had seen and heard in the void battlefield, also looked solemn. Although He Kuangping and Huangming had mentioned that the Daoyuo was in Xianmen Tianzong and could move freely in and out of the void battlefield, Dao Master Luofu had previously thought that the Daoyuo was a demon clan under the control of Xianmen Tianzong, like White Tiger Sage, Lu Yuan Sage, Nine-Clawed Eagle King, and King Philian. Such a situation was not uncommon in the human cultivation world of the entire Divine Land, but according to the difference in strength the demon clan raised was different. For example, the Taishu Temple raised real dragons in the Supreme Dragon Pond, while the weaker ones, like the Celestial Pool sect in the past, raised flying snow feathers, and so on. Xianmen Tianzong was home to a large number of demons, especially the White Tiger Great Saint. He was in the first tribulations, and he was only one step away from completing the first tribulations and entering the Dharma ending realm. Even in the entire Great Tianyuan world, he was one of the top experts among the demons. However, Yuta race was slightly more sensitive. On one hand, this was the last sacred emperor of the demon race that had ruled over Tianhuang wasteland thousands of years ago and intimidated the divine prefecture. The influence of Yuhuang's celestial sea had yet to completely dissipate. Although the Yudu race wasn't as powerful as it was in the past, it was still the strongest race in Tianhuang wasteland. Even though they had lost Kongyuan Yudu, a strong practitioner of the Dharma ending era, in the war between the two worlds, they were still the same. On the other hand, the Yudu race that had hidden their tracks for thousands of years had suddenly returned to the boundless worlds out of everyone's expectations in the recent war between the two worlds. This naturally attracted everyone's attention. The fact that the Zenith Heaven Immortal lived in Xianmen Tianzong without any restrictions was already a matter that attracted the attention of the world. The rumor that the Zenith Heaven Immortal could still receive guidance from Lin Feng was even more shocking. Today, Lin Feng proved that the rumor was false. However, the truth was even crazier than the rumor. A demon race and a Yuta beast had actually become the personal disciple of the current number one sect in the human cultivation world of the Divine Land, the ancestor of Xianmen Tianzong, Lin Feng. This instantly made the audience collectively speechless. In the past, there were some sects in the human cultivation world of the Divine Land that had accepted demon disciples, but that was something that was very far away from now. Today, those past events had almost become a dark history that these sects were unwilling to remember. Moreover, even then, the demon race and their status weren't as sensitive as the Zenith Heaven Immortal realm now. When the Tao Yuding retreated and the bell of creation rang again, everyone knew that Xianmen Tianzong still had important news to inform them. News that was even more shocking than the Tao Yuding's primordial spirit Tao. However, no one had expected it to be so shocking. This sudden blow caused everyone to see stars dancing in front of their eyes. As expected, they were even more shaken than the news of the Tao Yuding's primordial spirit Tao. Even the demon race of Infinite Wasteland was shocked when they received the news, and there were many discussions. At that moment, everyone's attention was placed on Kunlun Mountain Range and Jade Capital Mountain. Who knew that on Jade Capital Mountain Range, Lin Feng would simply say, "It's just a small matter. Sorry to disturb all of you. It's my honor to have all of you as witnesses today." With that, the illusion of light and shadow in the sky above Kunlun Mountain gradually disappeared. The people who were staring at the light and shadow couldn't help but be stunned again. It ended just like that. They were still waiting for Lin Feng to explain the situation in detail. There were countless questions in their hearts waiting for Lin Feng to answer. They wanted to know the origin of the Zenith Heaven Yudu and why Lin Feng had taken him in as a disciple. The demon race was fine, but the various forces of the human cultivation world were all bewildered and full of doubts about this matter. However, it was clear that Lin Feng had no intention of explaining in detail. It seemed that he was just informing everyone. Some people had many thoughts in their minds, guessing that the Zenith Heaven Immortal Realm was related to the battle between Xianmen Tianzong and the Yudu race, so they tried to seek confirmation. Some people found it hard to accept that Lin Feng had taken in a Zenith Heaven Immortal Realm as a personal disciple. Although they didn't dare to directly object, they tried to persuade him. However, no matter what kind of thoughts they had, when they arrived at the Kunlun mountain range, they were all received politely by Xianmin Tianzong. As for their inquiries, they were all met with calmness, making it hard for the visitors to get what they wanted. After the initial shock, Xianmin Tianzong quickly unified their opinions and thoughts, or at least unified their statements to the outside world. Everything was the same as when Li Yuanfang, Luo Qingwu, and the rest had entered the sect in the past. There seemed to be nothing special about it. However, that Zenith Heaven Yudu is of the demon race, and the Yudu race, silently, Tang Jun looked at the visitor who reminded him tactfully. His expression didn't change at all as he replied calmly. Our sect's patriarch comprehends the wonders of the great Tao and studies the pinnacle of creation. It's naturally not difficult for him to teach the demon race. The visitor choked slightly and could only smile bitterly. Of course, he knew that Tang Jun understood his intentions. He wasn't worried that Zenith Heaven would become Lin Feng's disciple and that Lin Feng would mislead him. However, with Tang Jun's reply, he couldn't continue speaking. On the other side, in the heavenly hall, Yang Tai sent the visitor off with a smile. If Senior Uncle Zenith Heaven becomes Patriarch's disciple, he has nothing to do with the Yudu race. It won't affect our sect's attitude towards the Yudu race. The visitor sighed. I wonder if it's possible to go through this Zenith Heaven. Fellow Taoist Zenith Heaven and the Yudu race. Yang Tai smiled and shook his head. Leave your name on the jade token, and Senior Uncle Zenith Heaven will be our sect's direct disciple. The visitor opened his mouth, but he couldn't make a sound. He swallowed the words that were at the tip of his tongue and could only smile bitterly. The same scene happened in Mortal Forest Residence, Heaven Desolate Valley, Snow Wind Valley, and many other cave abodes. The people who came to scout left Jade Capital Mountain and Kunlun Mountain. They looked at each other and smiled bitterly without saying a word. By right, if a person wanted to take in a disciple, it was a matter between the master and the disciple, and outsiders shouldn't interfere. However, with Lin Feng's current identity and status, others couldn't help but pay attention to him. As a Zenith Heaven of Yudu, his situation was even more special. It was hard to avoid suspicion from others in the Divine Land. However, Lin Feng clearly didn't care about the opinions of others. Who in the world could forcefully stop him? Although he didn't say it explicitly, Lin Feng's attitude was already more clear. Because I want to take him in as my disciple, I will. However, such a simple attitude made many people smile bitterly. From the start to the end, Zenith Heaven never showed his face, but his name had already spread throughout the world. Everyone hoped to see who this Zenith Heaven Yudu was. On Heaven Wasteland continent, the demons were also discussing someone to scout out the Yudu race, but they also came up empty-handed. The silence of the Yudu race revealed a piece of information. Although they felt dissatisfied and humiliated, they weren't surprised. It was as if they had expected it. The others couldn't help but have more guesses in their hearts. Senior sister, is that Zenith Heaven Yudu really a son of the Yuang Celestial Sea? He's even involved in the Spirit Sea? The Heavenly Wolf Saint stood behind the Enchantress and asked in a low voice. The Enchantress turned back to look at the Heavenly Wolf Saint. She was also a disciple of Empress Yu, but she had only saved him casually back then. Back then, he was just a little wolf cub. Not long after entering the sect, Empress Yu died. After that, it was Mo Yunzi who taught her demon divine arts on behalf of her master. The Heavenly Wolf Saint didn't even know anything about Empress Yu's identity, let alone anything else. Back then, Mo Yunzi had split up in the black-red world, and the Enchantress had lost her memories of being Mo Yunzi. Later, she had met the Heavenly Wolf Saint by chance. She, who had deep thoughts, didn't reveal any flaws when facing the Heavenly Wolf Saint and subdued him again. The Heavenly Wolf Saint also didn't know anything about Mo Yunzi's past. This made it easier for the Enchantress to not expose herself, but it didn't help the Enchantress find out the truth of the past. At this moment, the Enchantress had regained her memories, but she didn't show it on her face. She had always been mysterious and knew some secrets. The Heavenly Wolf Saint and the other demons under her didn't find it strange. That's right. The Grand Luo Yudu that has been taken in as the personal disciple of the Master of Mystic Gate isn't an ordinary Yudu beast. He's the son of Yuang Tianhai in the past. It's because of his existence that the Spirit Sea, which had been sealed for tens of thousands of years, was finally reopened. Xianmin, Tianzong, and Taishu Temple both obtained the chance to enter. The enchantress said silently. Back then, Yujing Mountain suddenly showed itself. The Master of Mystic Gate went out and didn't return. Many famous elders of Taishu Temple also disappeared mysteriously. Now it seems that it's all for the Spirit Sea. The Spirit Sea is still sealed, but it will eventually reopen. Although it's hard to say when, it won't be too long. Other than Xianmin, Tianzong, and Taishu Temple, the Yudu race also has a chance. The enchantress's gaze flickered. Now we have to be included. The heavenly wolf saint said solemnly, "The son of Yu Huang Tianhai became the disciple of the Master of Mystic Gate." Did the Yudu race and Xianmin Tianzong reach a secret agreement? The enchantress shook her head. Most likely not. She turned to look at the heavenly wolf saint. But if the news spreads, I'm sure many people will have the same guess as you, right? The news that was released before had some reservations. The original intention was to proceed step by step, so that the truth wouldn't be distorted and Xianmin Tianzong would directly deny it. But now it seems that the relationship between Grand Luo Yudu and the Master of Mystic Gate is far closer than we expected. In that case, we might as well send a congratulatory gift to make the divine land livelier. The heavenly wolf saint nodded. I'll let the news spread faster. Chapter 1349. After Heavenly Wolf Great Sage left, the figure of a woman in white appeared behind the enchantress. The enchantress naturally knew that it was her disciple, Long Yi. Long Yi came to the back of the enchantress, and her brows furrowed slightly. "Master, Dayuo Yudu is the son of Yuang Tianhai. Does the Master of Mystic Gate know about this?" The enchantress's gaze flickered slightly when she heard that. "He most likely knows." Long Yi said, "Since that's the case, he still insists on taking Dayuo Yudu as his direct disciple. Is he unbridled or magnanimous and fearless?" The enchantress smiled slightly. "How he isn't important. What's important is how other people view this problem. Using the current divine land as an example, this war between the two worlds has created a balanced situation where Xianmin, Tianzong, and Taishu Temple are in a stalemate." Long Yi said, "Right now, Xianmin Tianzong is powerful while Taishu Temple is weak. If Taishu Temple wants to turn the situation around, they can only unite everyone in the divine land to their side. However, most of the people in the human cultivation world in the divine land are now attached to Xianmin Tianzong, so the situation is becoming more and more unbalanced. If Xianmin Tianzong doesn't make any mistakes, there's no external pressure, and there's no unexpected change. Even if Taishu Temple recovers completely, it'll be hard for them to regain the upper hand." Long Ye's gaze moved about. However, now that the Master of Mystic Gate insists on taking Dayuo Yudu into the sect and even directly spread the news to the world, it's hard to say what the other human powers will think. Taishu Temple has a chance to take advantage. However, if the Master of Mystic Gate and the Yudu race really didn't contact each other privately, then this kind of thing can be easily proven. The enchantress placed his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "So now, let's see what Mirage Sun Yudu chooses to do." Long Yi looked at her master. Master's meaning is that if Yudu race goes with the flow and does something that looks like they want to cover up, they can make the suspicions of the human cultivation world in the divine land about Xianmin Tianzong become real. The enchantress said, "In this war between the two worlds, the master of the mystic sect, Xianmin Tianzong, and the heaven-crushing sword caused the demon race to lose and the human race to win. The human race also had the upper hand after the war. Under such circumstances, if Tianhuang continent wants to turn the tables and improve itself, it's necessary to weaken the opponent. The divine land is in civil strife, and Xianmin Tianzong is fighting with other human forces. At worst, they are hostile to each other and alienated. Naturally, this will have a corresponding effect. Let's see if Mirage Sun Yudu is willing to endure it for now. After all, to their Yudu race, it's a great humiliation for the son of Yu Wang to enter the enemy's sect. Hearing the enchantress's words, Long Yi seemed to be in thought. Disciple doesn't have a deep understanding of Mirage Sun Yudu, so I don't dare to make a rash judgment. However, in this war between the two worlds, although they have an arrogant side, they aren't like the dragon race. They seem to be very pragmatic instead. Grand Luo Yudu has fallen out with their Yudu race and entered Xianmen Tianzong's sect. They have already suffered this loss. If they can't get rid of Grand Luo Yudu, then Mirage Sun Yudu might use this point to make up for their losses in other areas. The enchantress said, everything has to be told by the facts. No matter if it's the fight for the Spirit Sea or the new war between the two worlds, there will definitely be a fight to the death between Xianmen Tianzong and Yudu race. At that time, all the rumors will fall apart on their own. But before that, unless Xianmen Tianzong takes the initiative to find Yudu race for a fight, it'll be very hard for the master of Xian Gate to prove himself. This period of entanglement is already enough. After all, as long as Taishu Temple find a reason, no matter if it's us or the other demon races of Heaven Wasteland Vastland, we just have to watch on the side silently. An indescribable smile appeared on the corner of Long Ye's lips. The internal strife of the human cultivation world will benefit us for nothing. That's why Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple are so restrained. But if one side colludes with our demon race, they will naturally have another consideration. She laughed softly. I just don't know if the master of Xian Gate will simply fight with the Yudu race to prove himself. The enchantress also laughed. That will depend on how Mirage Sun Yudu considers it. If they return to Blackboard World, the master of Xian Gate won't have enough clues, so it'll be very hard for him to find them and start a war. Even if they really want to fight, as long as it's handled properly, they can make it look like they're trying to cover it up, like they're working together to put on a show. Once the seed of doubt is planted, it will slowly germinate. She turned to look at Long Yi and smiled faintly. On the other hand, if Yudu race makes peace with Xianmen Tianzong and sends Yu Huang's son to the master of Xian Gate, no matter if it's an alliance or a hostage, it'll also be a blow to Yudu race's prestige in Heaven Wasteland Vastland. If Mirage Sun doesn't plan to endure this moment of anger, then there's nothing bad about them fighting a bloody battle with Xianmen Tianzong. Even though the master of Xian Gate is powerful, if he starts a war with the Yudu race with the goal of exterminating his race, he definitely won't have it easy. Tenryu Jin is holed up in the mysterious sea and can't come out, so his mood will be very stifled. When the time comes, he'll launch a chain attack, and the war between the two worlds that just calmed down will explode once again. The enchantress raised his head slightly and looked at the void. No matter the current situation of Heaven Primordial World or the matter of the Spirit Sea, to us, the more chaotic the situation, the better. Long Yi nodded. After a while, she suddenly thought of something and asked the enchantress, Master, we were the ones who leaked the news. Xianmen Tianzong and the Yudu race might focus their attention on us. The enchantress smiled faintly. With the tranquil concealing wondrous flower formation, as long as we don't take the initiative to leak our tracks and keep a low profile, it won't be easy for the Haotian Mirror to find us. Even though the master of Xian Gate doesn't cultivate Buddhism, I can see that he's also very proficient in the calculation of karma. In today's world, other than future star-glazed Buddha Lord, there's probably no one that can compare to him. However, it won't be that easy to find our exact location. Mirage Sun Yudu has experienced more than one calamity, and the demon power of his divine arts is world-shocking. His ability to sense the mysteries of heaven with sudden inspiration isn't something I can compare to. However, without enough clues, he won't be able to find us. However, we indeed have to be careful. Long Yi revealed a faint smile. That's right, but I'll have to trouble Senior Uncle. The enchantress said, Heavenly Wolf knows what he's doing. As long as he acts cautiously, No matter if it's the master of Xian Gate or the Yuta race, they won't make things too difficult for him if he can't find us. In this world, how many things are there that are completely worry-free? Since we want to reap rewards, we naturally have to bear the corresponding risks. Long Yi nodded her head, and the enchantress said, "Go and cultivate in peace as well. All kinds of schemes still have to rely on your own abilities in the end. Only then can the schemes be carried out as you wish." "Yes, master." Long Yi bowed and took her leave. The enchantress stayed on the spot alone and looked at the void in a daze. His eyes gradually lost focus. "Master, I'm not Yudu, so why do I have to exhaust my entire life for them and serve them with my life? Mo Yunzi has to fulfill his duty and wait bitterly for a lifetime. Ning Wanga treats herself as a human and helps Xianmin Tianzong. That's all their business. I want to fight for myself." 36 chimes of the bell rang on Jade Capital Mountain, and the news of Grand Luo becoming a personal disciple of Lin Feng spread throughout the world. The waves that were stirred up lasted for a long time. Soon, before the waves at the front subsided, the waves at the back rose again. Shocking news spread out from heaven primordial world once again. Grand Luo Yudu wasn't just a descendant of the Yudu race. He wasn't an ordinary Yuta beast, but the son of Yuang Tianhai in the past. When the news spread out, the world was shaken once again. If it was an ordinary Yuta beast, it could be said that he lived alone and barely had any connection with the Yudu race. However, the situation was obviously different for the son of Yuang Tianhai. After all, other than a limited number of people, no one knew about the arrangements of Yuang Tianhai and the experiences of Grand Luo back then. The son of Yuang Tianhai in the past had now become the personal disciple of Lin Feng, the master of the Celestial Gate. Such a matter could instantly make people speculate. Not only was the divine land shaken, the demons of Heaven Wasteland Vastland also started to pay close attention to the development of the situation. As the eye of the storm, the Kunlun mountain range, Xianmin Tianzong, was calm at this moment. Lin Feng seemed to be completely unaware of the disturbance in the outside world. Under his suppression, no matter how strong the winds and waves were, they couldn't really get close to Xianmin Tianzong. Although these winds and waves were blowing continuously and even slightly shaking his prestige, everyone was filled with apprehension. No one really wanted to question Lin Feng face to face. All the indirect attacks were blocked by the younger disciples. As time passed, the winds and waves started to calm down. It wasn't that people didn't pay attention to this matter anymore. Silently, the various powers of the human cultivation world and the divine land were waiting. They were waiting for an existence that had enough power to directly seek an answer from Lin Feng. This existence was naturally the Taishu Temple. Although it suffered heavy losses in the war between the two worlds and was suppressed by Xianmin Tianzong, the Taishu Temple with its deep foundation was still able to stand side by side with Xianmin Tianzong. In the eyes of some people, this was a great opportunity for the Taishu Temple to re-establish its prestige in the divine land. Whether it was arrogance or other reasons, in short, their opponent Xianmin Tianzong seemed to have taken the initiative to make a mistake at this time and sent a gift to their door. How could the Taishu Temple not accept such an opportunity? However, what surprised others was that the Taishu Temple really didn't have any reaction. It was even more silent than Xianmin Tianzong, as if it had really sealed its mountain and completely ignored the affairs of the world. Such a reaction made everyone dumbfounded. Even the enchantress, who was far away in Heaven Wasteland Vastland, was also puzzled. What's going on with the Taishu Temple? Even if there's something hidden in this matter, it shouldn't stop them from using this opportunity to make a fuss, right? Chapter 1350. The strange silence of the Void Temple made the people of the vast land of the Divine Continent and the vast land of Infinite Wasteland feel that it was inexplicable and incomprehensible. If it was said that it was to avoid internal friction in the human cultivation world of the vast land of the Divine Land, it was understandable that they did not start a war and control the conflict within a certain range. However, they did not even go to the door to question them. which made others puzzled. To Taishu Temple, this was a great chance to unite the other powers of the human cultivation world and make them distance themselves from Xianmen Tianzong. This was a great chance to stop Xianmen Tianzong from gradually taking over the core position of the Divine Land. It was rare for Xianmen Tianzong to make a mistake and send a gift to their door. Such an opportunity was hard to come by. If the heavens give you what you cannot take, you will be punished instead. If the Void Temple did not grasp this opportunity, in the confrontation with the Xian Gate Sky Sect, they would instead appear even weaker. This would inevitably make the other powers in the human cultivation world of the divine continent feel disappointed. Even though they had doubts about the actions of Xianmen Master Lin Feng, without Taishu Temple to take the lead, they could only slowly suppress their doubts and maintain the situation as it was. If Xianmen Tianzong had indeed made peace with the Yudu race, it would be fine. Once the seeds of doubt were planted, they would germinate, and when the time came, they would naturally come out. However, if the relationship between Xianmen Tianzong and the Yudu race wasn't like what everyone had guessed, there would be a day when the truth would be revealed. The longer time passed, the more likely that moment would appear. At that time, to Xianmen Tianzong, the innocent would be innocent, and the problem now wouldn't be a problem anymore. However, the silence and inaction of Taishu Temple would continue to affect the future. If there is a big change in the future, being able to let the strength and influence of the Taishu Temple suppress the Xian Gate Sky Sect, that would be fine. Otherwise, if this continues, the result would be that the strong become stronger and the weak become weaker. But no matter what the experts of the heaven primordial world and the human race thought, the Taishu Temple remained silent in the end. It maintained its previous state of sealing itself off, as if it did not care about anything that happened in the outside world. As the other party involved, Yudu race's reaction was rather thought-provoking. They didn't admit nor deny it, and they actually maintained their silence. Previously, when the news that the people of the Yudu clan had become the personal disciples of the master of the celestial sect of wonders, their reactions were treated as depression, anger, and humiliation. But at this moment, when there was news that Daluo was the son of Yuang Tianhai, this reaction completely changed. It seemed extremely ambiguous. The reason why the other people in Heaven Primordial Great World paid so much attention to this matter was also related to the reaction of Yudu clan. After the war between the two realms, the situation of the two realms, which had gradually calmed down, began to change slightly at this moment. Meanwhile, in Infinite Mainland, the Enchantress fell into deep thought after witnessing everything that was happening in front of him and the bizarre reaction of the Taishu Temple. "Yer, call your senior uncle back," the Enchantress suddenly said. Master has other things to instruct him to do. Long Yi appeared beside her and nodded. "Yes, Master, disciple will go right away." She paused for a moment and asked, "Master, why isn't there any reaction from the Taishu Temple? They sealed themselves off from the world, but it's not that they're isolated from the outside world. This matter has caused a huge commotion, so there's no reason for them to remain silent. If there's something we don't know about this matter, it doesn't affect them using this matter to unite the other powers in the cultivation world of the Divine Land to confront Xianmen Tianzong. After all, looking at the reactions of Xianmen Tianzong and the Yudu race, that Daluo's identity is indeed real. He really is the son of Yuang Tianzong," the Enchantress said indifferently. "It's not something we're hiding. The reason why Taishu Temple is silent might not be because of this matter, but something else has affected their decision. If I'm not wrong, Taishu Temple might have some secrets that have landed in the hands of the master of Xian Gate." Long Yi heard this and seemed to be in deep thought. What kind of secrets could it be? Something that can make Taishu Temple so afraid to take action? If it really has such great power, wouldn't Taishu Temple have no chance against Xianmen Tianzong and could only submit? The Heavenly Charm Great Saint said, "It shouldn't be able to cause any substantial damage. It's more likely that it's a matter of reputation. Therefore, on similar issues, the Void Temple can only maintain silence. Of course, this is also related to their current inferiority. From the looks of it now, we can only drop this matter. However, It's just a casual move to stir up trouble. If it doesn't work, there's no loss for us." She laughed softly. "The master of Xian Gate knows that we leaked the news, and he also knows some of my secrets, such as my true form and innate divine arts. The enchantress was the most mysterious great demon in the recent thousands of years in Tianwang vast land. Everything was a mystery. Before this, even what kind of life form she had become a demon was unknown. Unknown information was always more threatening than anything else." Her relationship with Imo, Yunzi, and Empress Yu naturally made the Yudu race pay attention to her. Although Ning Wanga had endorsed these situations, it wasn't easy to prove it. The enchantress had many excuses to cover it up. Still, just like what happened with the Grand Luo, it was inevitable that many would feel doubtful. Naturally, that included the demonic elites under her command. Still, the heavenly charm great sage was very strict and could control the situation, which was why she did not mind it from the start. What she was concerned about was that no matter if it was Xianmin Heaven Sect or Yudu race, they all knew about the news of her obtaining the Yudu treasure from that foreign space. While they were searching for her, if the news would be leaked, it would naturally cause the other demon races to covet the Spirit Sea. After all, compared to Xianmin Tianzong and the Yudu race, her side was the weakest. Before this, if the celestial sect of Xianmin and the Yudu clan did not wish for too many people to interfere with the matter of the Spirit Ocean, then now that she had revealed the matter of the grand heavenly immortal, it was very likely that they would reveal the news of the Spirit Ocean as well. That way, there would be more people helping them find the enchantress. Even if the enchantress's ability to hide was strong, her situation would be even more difficult. However, all of this was within the enchantress's expectations. If Xianmin Tianzong and the Yudu race didn't say anything, she would leak the news herself. She just wanted to see how the matter of grand heavenly immortal would develop and see how the human cultivation world of Taishu Temple and the Divine Land would react. Now, that Taishu Temple was strangely silent. There was no need for her to wait any longer. After Heavenly Wolf Great Saint returned, the enchantress flicked his finger and a few streams of light landed in front of him. Heavenly Wolf, spread these things out. Heavenly Wolf Great Saint, and Long Ye's eyes flashed. We finally obtained a method to enter the Spirit Sea. Are we just going to give it to someone else for nothing? The enchantress smiled faintly. Don't worry, we've already left our share. We just need more time to prepare. Even though the Spirit Sea is about to reopen, there's no rush. As for the other things, there's naturally a reason to do so. Xianmin Tianzong, Yudu race, and Taishu Temple are powerful. If we want to take advantage of the situation, the more chaotic it is, the better. The more people there are, the greater our chances. Otherwise, how can those three families that have already taken the initiative be easy to deal with? Heavenly Wolf Great Saint and Long Yi both nodded. Long Yi said, in that case, we have to ensure that these things don't fall into the hands of those three families. Otherwise, the situation will be even worse. The enchantress looked at Heavenly Wolf Great Saint, and he chuckled. I naturally understand this logic. I'll be careful, but I have to admit that it's not just about the Spirit Sea. Even during normal times, those three families are also powerful. It's hard to guarantee that they won't snatch it from others. It's fine. Who doesn't take a little risk when doing things? There are still layers of conflicts between the three families that can't be resolved. It won't be hard for others to protect what they have, the enchantress said. To us, the best outcome is naturally to control the Spirit Sea. We'll settle for the second best. No one will be able to get it. Leaving it for the future to slowly find an opportunity is also not a bad outcome. Next is Xianmin Tianzong, Taishu Temple, and Yudu race. Even if they fall into the hands of other powers, it will only make the situation in Heaven Origin even more chaotic. If the Spirit Sea falls into the hands of one of the three families, it will be the worst outcome. The enchantress waved his hand. Heavenly Wolf, I'll leave this matter to you. Even though it's better to spread the news as far as possible, we need to be even more careful and hide our tracks. We have to keep a low profile. Your target will be very obvious, so pay more attention. Heavenly Wolf Great Saint nodded and replied, I understand. The day the spirit sea reopens, it will be very lively, won't it? The enchantress stared at the void in the distance and muttered to himself. As expected, before the controversy caused by the Grand Luo died down, all kinds of news about the enchantress began to spread in the Heaven Origin world. Furthermore, the information was much richer than that of the Grand Luo. From the origin of the enchantress, to the characteristics of his natural talents and divine arts, to all kinds of life experiences, nothing was left out. It was extremely detailed, and it was too much for the eyes to take in. Just as everyone was discussing whether the enchantress was the representative of the Yudu race in the Heaven Origin world after hiding in the Blackboard realm, another piece of heavy news rose from the infinite wasteland. One of the 7 seas of Heaven Origin, the Spirit Sea, was about to reopen in recent years. As the news spread, there were also some clues about the whereabouts of some treasures that could give people a chance to enter the Spirit Sea after it reopened. In an instant, the entire Heaven Origin world was boiling over. The situation that had just ended the war between the two worlds heated up again. Whether it was the divine land or the infinite wasteland, undercurrents were surging again. Above the Kunlun mountain range, on a mystic heaven treasure tree at the peak of the Jade Capital Mountain, Linfeng had already returned to the mystic Heaven Time cave at the top of the tree. His expression was calm, and his gaze pierced through the void. Spirit Sea. He opened his palm, and a few purple crystals and a few red jades were placed silently in his palm, shining with a bright luster. Chapter 1351. Lin Feng weighed the item in his hand and calculated silently in his heart. It feels like the Spirit Sea might reopen in less than 100 years. What's the reason? Did Taishu Temple's attempt to open it earlier still work? I don't think so. Is it because Taishu Temple tried to open the Spirit Sea earlier and got rid of the restraints of the Spirit Sea imprint earlier than expected? I don't think so either. Activating Heaven Punishing Sword caused the Spirit Sea to change? I don't think so. This shouldn't be enough to have such a huge impact on the Spirit Sea. Lin Feng pondered for a moment and shook his head slightly. His eyes flashed with an indescribable luster. In the distant void, a bright sword light landed and transformed into the figure of a girl in purple. It was Luo Qingwu. She landed in Xintian Time Light Paradise and bowed to Lin Feng. Master, disciple is here to report back. Lin Feng smiled slightly. The news is already spread. I already know. Luo Qingwu looked at Lin Feng with a sorrowful gaze. Master, junior brother Daluo, as one of the few people in Xianmen, Tianzong who knew of Daluo's existence long ago, Luo Qingwu had known Daluo for a long time, and they had a deep friendship. Lin Feng's gaze was calm as he nodded. That's right. The sorrow in Luo Qingwu's eyes became even stronger, but she closed her eyelids instead, not letting her sorrow show. She clearly knew that the person who had the closest relationship with the Zenith Heaven in the entire sect was none other than her master before her. Lin Feng, who had personally witnessed the destruction of the Zenith Heaven, undoubtedly felt even heavier than them. Seeing this, Lin Feng smiled and didn't expose her. Instead, he said in a calm tone, the enchantress intends to muddy the waters and spread the news of Daluo. In that case, let's spread the news of her as well and make the situation even more chaotic. She will spread the treasures of Yuwang, Celestial Sea, and it will definitely cause everyone to fight for them. You can also participate, but there's no need to force it. Luo Qingwu bowed and said, this disciple understands. I will take my leave first. After she left the mysterious Heaven Time Light Utopia, Lin Feng looked up at the misty void above his head and fell into a daze. After a while, he retracted his gaze. Silently, he looked at the empty world before him. Then he extended a finger and slowly drew a line in the air. A Taiji diagram appeared, engraved in the space, slowly spinning. As Lin Feng's eyes flickered, streams of light flew out and landed on the Taiji symbol in front of him. The streams of light dissipated and fused with it. Although there were endless disturbances in the outside world, peace seemed to have returned to Yujing Mountain in the Kunlun Mountains. At this moment in the void battlefield, there were figures constantly breaking through the void, avoiding the chaotic void storms and traversing within. Zhu Yi stood on the streak of light formed by the Permitha Bridge with his hands behind his back. Above his head, a huge spirit turtle lay in the air. Large amounts of light constantly flickered in the turtle's eyes. Countless talismans constantly rearranged themselves, deducing. On the back of the enormous tortoise was an extremely enormous Tao talisman of changes, and it was ceaselessly changing. The known and the unknown, the clear and the obscure interweaved into countless possibilities, and then they ceaselessly dispersed while their numbers decreased without end. Only a few possibilities remained, and they were connected to threads that were neither bright nor dim, and they extended into the unseen, mysterious, and mysterious. Beside Zhu, he was a tall and handsome young man. It was Shi Tianhao. He currently sat beside Zhu Yi with his eyes closed, as if he was meditating. On Shi Tianhao's body, exuberant vitality and vigorous qi emerged together with the barren, obliterated, chaotic, and ignorant concept of power. They constantly blended together, as if they were looking for the final balance point. The primordial heart demon concession mantra that Wang Lin obtained was indeed very compatible with Shi Tianhao. It allowed Shi Tianhao to take another great step forward in the spiritual realm of the invisible and intangible spirit body. Shi Tianhao refined his own body into origami and his own spirit into surplus qi. His body had always been his strength, so refining origami was a piece of cake. However, refining the spirit into surplus qi for Shi Tianhao still required some accumulation and comprehension. The origami's surplus qi was not balanced, so even if he took the step of refining the spirit to return to the void, it was not perfect. Therefore, in order to not have any regrets, Shi Tianhao even suppressed his refining of origami and continued to cultivate and accumulate, so that the origami's surplus qi could be balanced and achieved together. At this moment, he was using his own heavenly virtue scripture to verify the primordial heart demon concession mantra. His understanding of the principles of the world deepened, and he was already very close to taking that final step. Zhu Yi used the Sutra of Changes to activate the 10,000 Elephants Origin Concealment Mantra and constantly calculated the whereabouts of a mortal dragon city. There was also a hint of sorrow beneath his calm expression. Although his main body was in the void battlefield, his Haoyang clone was still in the vast thousand domains. He already knew about the news that was buzzing in the vast thousand domains, and he knew more than most people about the origin of mortal realm. Zhu Yi could only feel dejected and speechless at the origin of mortal realm's choice. Zhu Yi shook his head slightly. With a thought, light flashed in his eyes as the Tao-changing talisman on the back of the giant tortoise above his head began to circulate even more quickly. The threads of light that were neither bright nor dark, and seemed to be both real and incorporeal, gradually began to converge and finally fuse into one. When these threads had completely converged into one final thread, the light in the eyes of the giant tortoise above Zhu Yi's head suddenly shone brightly. The final thread gradually disappeared, and the light in the giant tortoise's eyes became extremely dazzling as it shot into the distance. Even though it was affected by the chaotic space and time in the void battlefield, causing the light in the giant tortoise's eyes to distort and change shape, sometimes expanding into a curtain of light, sometimes twisting and winding, the light continued to extend into the distance. Seeing this, Zhu Yi's spirits rose. The Permitha bridge beneath his feet rose into the air and turned into an endless rainbow, heading in the direction where the light in the giant tortoise's eyes was pointing. After forcibly tearing open a void storm and passing through layers of space, Zhu Yi and the Permitha bridge beneath his feet suddenly stopped and stood in the void. Nothing could be seen in the pitch-black space, but Zhu Yi did not continue forward. His eyes swept around. A moment later, Zhu Yi suddenly manifested his void return Dharma form. His 3-zhang-tall body stood on the Permitha bridge, and the light of the giant tortoise above his head had completely disappeared, leaving only a giant Yi-Dao talisman. As the Yi-Dao talisman operated, the scene in front of Zhu Yi completely changed. In the pitch-black void, a boundless fog suddenly appeared, and in the fog there was bright and dazzling light. As the Yi-Dao talisman continued to operate, bright light rays lit up one after another. The bright and resplendent rays of light increased, and the fog gradually dissipated. These rays of light crisscrossed, slicing and shredding the fog, causing the fog to gradually dissipate. The existence that was covered by the fog revealed its true appearance. There, an immeasurably long city wall stood in the distance. Silently, it extended to both ends of the void, with no end in sight. The city wall was so long that even the endless void, which had lost its sense of distance and direction, seemed to be able to be measured and estimated. This was, of course, the creation treasure that the great Qin dynasty had created in the past, the immortal dragon city. However, this great wall was currently lifeless, without any of its former glory. It was as if it had completely fallen into a deep sleep. Zhu Yi looked at the endless city wall in front of him, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. As expected. That's right. This change is something that Stonefeather did not expect. The Yi-Dao talisman above his head disappeared, and Zhu Yi withdrew his void return Dharma form. The scene in front of him changed again, turning back into the dark void. The void seemed to be empty. Zhu Yi took out a token. The token was engraved with 5-colored dragon patterns, and the word Qin was engraved in the center. This was the treasure that the great Qin dynasty's new emperor Shizongtong had personally entrusted to him after he had contacted the great Qin dynasty's Shizongmao and the others before he entered the void battlefield. According to the agreement between the two parties, after activating this token, it would guide the great Qin dynasty's cultivators to this place. As for whether they could reclaim the immortal dragon city, it would depend on the great Qin dynasty's own ability. Zhu Yi injected his magic power and divine sense into the token. The token formed by the 5-colored dragon patterns instantly flashed with a dazzling golden light, and it was filled with the majesty of an emperor. As the light flashed, a 5-colored light dragon, red, yellow, green, black, and white, rose from the token and danced in the dark void. The great Qin dynasty's monarch, Shizongmao's voice sounded from within. "Thank you, Master Yi." The great Qin dynasty's new emperor, Shizongtong, had to guard the western tomb city, and he would not move easily. This time, the great Qin dynasty's team that entered the void battlefield was led by another Dao integration stage venerable, monarch Shizongmao. Zhu Yi looked at the token before him calmly. He stood on the Permitha Golden Bridge with his hands behind his back, and he waited patiently. The dark void in front of him was as tranquil as ever. It looked vast and boundless, and there was nothing there. Sure, Tianhao's eyes were closed, and he was still meditating. He seemed to be unaware of what was happening in the outside world. As time passed, before the great Qin dynasty's team arrived, the dark void in front of Zhu Yi suddenly trembled violently. Space cracked, and huge cracks extended continuously in the vast void. Within those cracks, there was a faint golden light flashing. The source of the light was the Great Wall that stretched as far as the eye could see. The Great Wall itself did not even move. Instead, a dazzling golden light kept surging out from it. It became more and more dazzling, and it lit up the pitch-black void battlefield in front of them. It was as if an incredibly powerful god had awakened from a long slumber, and it opened its eyes to look at the world. The immortal dragon city that had fallen into silence seemed to have regained its luster at this moment, and it displayed its great power. Zhu Yi watched this scene silently, and sure Tianhao, who had been meditating with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes at this moment. His gaze was like lightning, and it shot toward the immortal dragon city. He stood up on the Permitha Golden Bridge, and a Tai Chi symbol appeared on his forehead, and continuously rotated. Chapter 1352. Shi Tianhao stood on the Permitha Golden Bridge and looked at the immortal dragon city. His eyes flickered with divine light. His body began to change between his human body and the primordial Tai Chi diagram, which was the manifestation of his primordial spirit. The vigorous vitality of the creation of all living things blended with the chaotic aura of desolation and ignorance. However, they were independent of each other and fluctuated continuously. A moment ago, the two sides were perfectly integrated. The next moment, they were opposing each other. The contradiction between them was clear. The power of the two kept changing. Shi Tianhao stared at the immortal dragon city. His eyes were filled with confusion and awareness. In the end, his eyes became clearer and clearer. The city in the sky appeared above Shi Tianhao's head. The huge, majestic city pressed down on the world. This divine city, which looked like the divine palace of the highest heavenly palace, was also gradually changing at this moment. It turned into the spiritual bodies of the 12 divine generals, standing in all directions and shaking the entire space. The physical sky city and the spiritual silhouettes of the 12 heavenly immortal generals were also constantly changing. Zhu Yi looked at this scene. The Yi-Dao talisman flashed in his eyes, and he smiled. Apart from the primordial heart demon dispel curse, witnessing the changes of the immortal dragon city was another opportunity for Shi Tianhao to break through the last hurdle and continue to expand his Dao of yin and yang. In a sense, the changes of the immortal dragon city were similar to Shi Tianhao's state. No wonder it could help Shi Tianhao take that step faster. Master asked Tianhao to come with me because of this consideration, Zhu Yi thought. Looking at the changes of Shi Tianhao, he was slightly moved. He had the same Dao foundation as Shi Tianhao. Although the direction he walked was different, he had a different feeling and inspiration at this moment. In particular, he had also comprehended the primordial heart demon dispel curse that Wang Lin had provided. At this moment, he felt that his mind was more agile. Some of the hurdles that he had been thinking about before suddenly became clear. Under the gazes of Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao, the immortal dragon city in the void gradually shifted out of the pitch-black crack. Its huge figure vaguely occupied the entire void. On the surface of the huge city wall, apart from the dazzling golden light, there was also a layer of misty light, like the river of time. Looking at this brilliance, it was difficult to fathom the speed at which time flowed. At first glance, it seemed as if time had completely stopped, and the river water was completely frozen, without any change. However, if one looked closely, they would feel that every single inch, every single line, and every single that was constantly changing. It was like flowing water, flowing away swiftly, and it was difficult to retrieve. But when one gazed at it for a long time and continued to carefully experience it, they felt that the river of time still seemed to be at a standstill. It was as if no matter how the world changed, the river itself would never change. At this moment, immortal Dragon City was enveloped in this kind of misty brilliance. It was like the river of time, hard to grasp, as if it was eternal, like an instant. Under the envelopment of the river of light, a consciousness gradually awakened, becoming clearer and clearer. Shi Tianhao did not carefully comprehend the concept contained in the river of time. If he wanted to comprehend a similar principle, he had Lin Feng's cosmic light of extreme, celestial pole to observe. At this moment, his attention was completely focused on the consciousness that was gradually awakening in the depths of the immortal Dragon City. As this consciousness awakened, the immortal Dragon City's power gradually recovered and increased in the various changes that occurred. After observing for a moment, Shi Tianhao suddenly sat cross-legged on the Permitha Golden Bridge. His gaze was still focused on the immortal Dragon City, but the changes in his body were becoming more and more obvious. Originally, because of the battle between the Revolution Godstone, they had fused into one, and he could change his physical body and Yuan Shun at will. At this moment, they were gradually separating. As his physical body sat on the Permitha Golden Bridge, a barren aura covered Shur Tianhao's entire body, causing his physical body to seem to have transformed into the primordial state of the universe before the world was created. Everything was chaotic, without consciousness, formless, and without substance. But within the barren chaos, there seemed to be a thriving vitality. It was like a seed buried in the soil, and it could break out at any time. And above Shur Tianhao's physical body, the spiritual bodies of the 12 heavenly generals appeared silently. From their facial features to their armor and weapons, they were all vivid and lifelike. The 12 heavenly generals shouted towards the void in unison. Immortal, void, instrument, Shua, celestial, June, Tian, Zhu, chaos, wholeness, subjugation. Every syllable caused the void to tremble. And as the primordial chaos formed by the barren aura in Shur Tianhao's physical body surged and bloomed, it was like the primordial chaos had opened up and the primordial chaos had appeared. At this moment, the spiritual bodies of the 12 heavenly generals in the void above his head also suddenly changed. The light around the 12 heavenly generals condensed, and they turned into 12 tall, golden men. They were heavy and dignified, and they stood in the void, tall and proud. Silently, Shur Tianhao's physical body sat on the Permitha Golden Bridge. The primordial chaotic aura and the thriving vitality alternated, like the cycle of the universe's birth and death. And the 12 heavenly generals in the spiritual state and the 12 golden men in the physical state were also changing, and the cycle began again. On the other side, on the primordial Tai Chi diagram formed by Shur Tianhao's primordial spirit, a vigorous and powerful vitality surged continuously, as if it had instantly turned the barren universe into a world of creation filled with life. Everything grew, multiplied, and strengthened. And under this world of exuberant vitality, a piece of barren chaos could be faintly seen, as if it was the starting point and origin of all things. When creation multiplied to the extreme, it gradually came to an end. But after the end, a new world was established, and the end was also the starting point. In the void above the Tai Chi diagram formed by Shur Tianhao's primordial spirit, a huge and majestic sky city floated in the void. Although it was broken, the shocking power within it still made people's hearts palpitate. At this moment, the entire majestic city was constantly changing between a physical city and a spirit city that was completely made of light. The spiritual city of light did not make people feel as heavy and domineering as the sky city, as if it was suppressing the heavens. It looked extremely ordinary, without any special aura. However, from Zhu Yi's perspective, he could vaguely sense a mysterious power that traversed the starry sky and was ethereal and distant. Just like Shur Tianhao's primordial spirit below, which was changing between the vigorous creation and the barren primitive state, the sky city and the shining city were also constantly changing. At this moment, Shur Tianhao's primordial spirit and physical body were separated. They seemed to be doing their own things, but there seemed to be a mysterious connection between them, faintly resonating, opposing, and fusing. In the ancient times, after a long period of time, the sky city and the azure heaven array, which had completely merged together, were now also separated, and at the same time, there was a mysterious change. They seemed to be separated, but just like Shur Tianhao himself, they shone and reflected off each other. Zhu Yi looked at Shur Tianhao, and a faint smile appeared on his face. It's almost done. Although they were in the unpredictable and dangerous void battlefield, and there were powerhouses of the dragon race that could appear at any time, Shur Tianhao did not hesitate at all. Under the current environment, he began to cultivate the spirit to return to the void realm. And Zhu Yi did not have any objections to this. He stood quietly on the Permitha Bridge, staring at the immortal dragon city while protecting his junior brother. In the void battlefield area where they were, the chaotic spiritual energy actually started to gradually become orderly, and they all pointed in the same direction, which was Tianhao on the Permitha Bridge. Vast and mysterious magic power rippled in the surrounding void, causing people to not dare to approach, even if they sensed the peculiarity of this place. In the Immortal Dragon City, the consciousness became clearer and clearer, and it gradually sensed the changes caused by Tianhao. Even this consciousness was slightly restraining its own power waves, as if it was also observing Tianhao's movements. Zhu Yi had no intention of interfering. Silently, he stood to the side and watched Tianhao and the Immortal Dragon City. His eyes flashed slightly, and he looked toward the void in the distance. There, a crack appeared in the space, and a dignified, white-haired elder walked out. It was the great Qin dynasty's monarch Rose son, Zhongmao. Zhongmao first heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the Immortal Dragon City. Then he saw Tianhao on the Permitha Bridge, and his heart shook slightly when he sensed the changes. Is he trying to refine his return to void Dharma body, refine his spirit, and ascend to the return to void stage? Refining the spirit to return to the void, and there's already such a big movement. Zhongmao shook his head, but did not have a particularly big reaction. After all, the people of the celestial sect of Xianmen, especially Tianhao, Zhu Yi, and the others, who were known as the four heroes of Xianmen, had all kinds of shocking performances, which had really made the other powerhouses of the human cultivation world in the vast land of the divine land a little numb. When would something as big as refining the spirit to return to the void not cause such a huge commotion? Zhongmao would only be surprised. Even so, his heart was full of praise. After composing himself, Zhongmao walked toward the Permitha Bridge and said to Zhu Yi, "Thank you, Ez. At the same time, I wish Celestial Emperor Huang the success of refining the return to void Dharma body and ascending to the return to void stage." Zhu Yi replied, "Monarch Rose Sun is too polite. My junior martial brother is currently at the most critical juncture of his cultivation, so I can only greet you after he has completed his cultivation." Zhongmao nodded emphatically. Of course. As he spoke, his gaze also fell upon the Immortal Dragon City. After all, this was the most important reason he had come here, and it was also the most important matter for the entire Great Qin dynasty. Although this might be disrespectful to their celestial emperor, in the hearts of all the members of the Great Qin imperial family, the gains and losses of the Immortal Dragon City were more important to the Great Qin dynasty than the life and death of Yu. Zhu Yi's gaze also fell upon the Immortal Dragon City. Monarch Rose Sun, you must be mentally prepared. The situation has changed beyond everyone's expectations, and I'm afraid even fellow Taoists you didn't expect this. Zhongmao was slightly taken aback, and he carefully examined the Immortal Dragon City. After a long while, his expression gradually became blank, and he exclaimed, "How could this be?" Chapter 1353. Although the northern militant had risen, there was still a gap between them and the Great Qin dynasty. Because of Xianmen Tianzong, the Great Zhou dynasty was able to preserve its last bit of vitality, but the drop in strength was as great as the difference between heaven and earth. The Great Qin Empire had been severely damaged in the war between the two worlds, and it could no longer be described as a great blow to its vitality. The situation had been unstable for a while, but it had finally stabilized. Although its strength had dropped, it still had a slight advantage compared to the Great Zhou dynasty. However, if the northern militant and the Great Zhou dynasty allied, the Great Qin dynasty would not be able to gain any advantage. However, this was not what made Great Qin nervous. The true pressure came from the ancient emperor's bloodline that had returned to the divine land. They had established an ancient kingdom and established an ancient dynasty. Not only did they have many experts, they also had the long-life Lotus Throne, which made Great Qin, Great Zhou, and the northern militant feel great pressure. Compared to the Great Zhou and the northern militant, Great Qin still had a chance to turn the situation around, which was to find the immortal Dragon City. Now that there was a chance, the Great Qin dynasty was naturally very excited. The Rojinsan monarch Shizong was also very happy, but reality poured a bucket of cold water on him. The immortal Dragon City was not built by Stonefeather alone, but the entire Great Qin dynasty's precious resources. The current Great Qin emperor, the former Great Qin Nanming monarch Shizong, and the Rojinsan monarch Shizong had also participated in it, so he knew a lot about the immortal Dragon City. Now that he was closely observing and comprehending the immortal Dragon City's aura and the ripples of intent, Shizong immediately found that there was something different. His expression gradually became dull, and he could not maintain his dignified appearance. He was not surprised by Shizong reaction, as if it was within his expectations. Easy. Shizong came back to his senses and turned to look at Zhu Yi. Zhu Yi shook his head. The sect, and I will not interfere. Hearing this, Shizong face became slightly bitter. He frowned and stared at the immortal Dragon City in front of him. After a while, the Great Qin dynasty's elder deeply breathed in, and a hint of fierceness flashed in his eyes. He opened his palm to the side, and a jet-black four-edged mace appeared in his hand. The surface of the jet-black four-ribbed iron mace flickered with a dark golden radiance. It seemed to be stained with dried blood, and it emitted a frightening, fiendish, and bloody aura. The murderous aura was so thick that it caused Shizong's dermic powers and aura to become violent and bloodthirsty. Streams of blood qi spread out in the air. The blood qi condensed and gradually took form. It was a long blood dragon that was tens of thousands of feet long. These blood dragons all had sinister and terrifying appearances. Blood flowed from their 7 apertures, as if they were enduring great pain. They contained surging hatred and resentment. Zhu Yi recognized it. It was a Mahayana-grade magic treasure of the Great Qin dynasty, the Konglong Jian. During the war between the two worlds, it was when King Ryong Shizong was besieged by Great Sage and Dragon King Honing. If not for this treasure, Shizong might have perished on the spot. In that battle, the Konglong Jian had been injured along with Shizong. However, from the looks of it, it seemed to be gradually recovering. A ferocious glint appeared in Shizong's eyes. He stretched out his palm, and a 5-colored light dragon rushed out. It gathered and circled in front of him, forming a Dao fruit. This Dao integration realm big shot was going to go all out from the start. He used his Dao fruit to activate the Konglong Jian, raising the jet-black 4-ribbed iron mace that was overflowing with a fiendish aura. He was going to strike the immortal Dragon City in front of him. Previously, Shizong and the Great Qin dynasty had been focused on restoring the immortal Dragon City and bringing it back. However, he had clearly changed his mind at this moment. He did not plan to destroy the immortal Dragon City. Instead, he tried to interrupt the awakening of the immortal Dragon City. At this moment, although the consciousness in the immortal Dragon City was becoming clearer, it had not completely awakened yet. Shizong planned to interrupt this process first and then try to bring the immortal Dragon City back to West Hill City. He would slowly plan with the Great Qin dynasty's new emperor, Shizong, and the other experts. However, although the Konglong Jian was fiendish, it could not break through the misty light on the surface of the immortal Dragon City that was like the River of Time. The iron mace fell into the River of Time. It instantly split into thousands of figures. It was as if it was in countless fragments of time. Shizong's expression was grave. He formed hand seals with both hands, and light dragons rushed out of his body and landed in the River of Time. Each light dragon corresponded to a light shadow of the Konglong Jian, and they bit on it. Then, the light dragons retreated and pulled the Konglong Jian's light shadow out of the River of Time. Once it left the River of Time, the thousands of light shadows gathered together again and condensed into a jet-black 4-ribbed iron mace. It was held by a huge light dragon. Then, as the dragon waved its head, the iron mace once again struck the immortal dragon city. The immortal dragon city and the river of time on the surface had not completely awakened yet. Shi Zhongmao's attack with the Konglong Jian seemed fierce and rash, but it was actually a mysterious attack. It immediately caused the river of time to fluctuate. However, this attack that alternated between real and fake was still not enough to completely break the river of time. Shi Zhongmao's expression gradually turned grim. He could clearly feel that the consciousness in the immortal dragon city was awakening more and more clearly, and the speed was getting faster and faster. Meanwhile, the power of the river of time was also getting stronger and stronger. If he couldn't break this defense in a short period of time, his chances in the future would be even slimmer. Shi Zhongmao looked at Zhu Yi, who was beside him. Zhu Yi shook his head slightly, indicating that he really wouldn't interfere. He wouldn't stop Shi Zhongmao, nor would he help him. However, this was already bad news for Shi Zhongmao. With the power fluctuations that the immortal dragon city was displaying, he was destined to be unable to break it by himself. Right at this moment, the Yi Dao talisman flashed in Zhu Yi's eyes again, and he sensed something. Without saying anything, he directly manifested his void return stage Dharma body. The Dharma body of 30 feet tall stood on the surface of the Golden Permitha Bridge. 8 colorful halos appeared around the golden bridge, and it turned into a long golden rainbow. It swayed horizontally and stood in the void. At this moment, the void was shattered. Where the rolling golden light flowed, a golden dragon might auspicious cloud appeared, and it collided with the golden Permitha bridge in the middle of the void. The golden radiance from both sides shattered at the same time, revealing the magnificent golden Permitha bridge and the Kunlun Dragon King's enormous heavenly dragon body. The Kunlun Dragon King stared at Zhu Yi coldly. As the dragon scales on his body opened and closed, the golden dragon might transformed into a cloud that was constantly inhaling and exhaling powerful blood qi. He didn't roar, or speak. However, at this moment, the Kunlun Dragon King's solemn majesty and ice-cold killing intent intertwined with each other, causing the temperature of the entire void to plummet. There was no warmth in his eyes as he stared at the immortal dragon city and Zhu Yi. Shi Zhongmao looked at the Kunlun Dragon King in front of him, and he suddenly had mixed feelings. Facing this great demon of the Dragon Clan in the Dharma ending realm, he couldn't remain calm. At this moment, the aura of the Konglong Jian, which was overflowing with ferocious qi, also dropped slightly. Most of the blood dragons that dispersed in the void converged and hovered around the body of the four-edged iron Jian. They all let out low roars of vigilance and resentment. The Kunlun Dragon King glanced at the Konglong Jian coldly. Without any warning, the long dragons formed by blood qi around the Konglong Jian collapsed one after another. The body of the Konglong Jian flashed with a mournful red light, and it kept vibrating. It took Shi Zhongmao a lot of effort to continue holding it and not let it fall. The Kunlun Dragon King withdrew his gaze and continued to look at the immortal dragon city. He carefully sensed the waves of will and the aura of power within. A trace of astonishment flashed in his eyes, and then they became cold again. Zhu Yi revealed his void return Dharma body, and a huge Tao-changing talisman glowed above his head. He turned his head and looked in another direction. The void in that direction also shattered, and another primordial celestial dragon covered in golden, auspicious clouds appeared. It was another Dharma-ending realm expert of the Dragon Clan, Shen Dragon King. The two great demons of the Dharma-ending realm, one in front and one behind, sandwiched Zhu Yi and the others in the middle of the immortal dragon city. They stared at them coldly. Although they were a bit slower than Zhu Yi, the experts of the Dragon Clan found the immortal dragon city before it completely woke up and rushed here. Such a change has happened. It's really unexpected, but it's still unforgivable. Shen Dragon King roared and directly revealed his true form. A huge golden claw reached out from the auspicious clouds of the dragon power and grabbed at the immortal dragon city. On the other side, the Kunlun Dragon King was still silent. All his anger and hatred had been condensed into a cold and merciless murderous intent. He didn't want to say anything and only wanted to destroy the enemy completely. The two great demons of the Dharma-ending realm of the Dragon Clan revealed their true forms together. The violent waves of demonic power and blood chi stirred up a violent storm in the void battlefield, sweeping across all directions. In the twisted space and time, the Kunlun Dragon King and Shun Dragon King reached out their claws and grabbed at the immortal Dragon City first. At the same time, the two of them opened their mouths and spat out a violent stream of golden light. Wherever it passed, the void was directly reduced to nothingness, completely annihilated. The two streams of golden light converged like the sea, covering the sky and rushing towards Zhu Yi and the others. Zhu Yi raised his eyebrows and made a spell with both of his hands. Then he put his hands together in front of his chest. Instantly, the boundless light beams spread out in all directions and turned into a huge spell formation. The spell formation isolated the golden light beams from the outside and prevented the destructive power from getting close to it. At the center of the spell formation, 12 light spots were moving up and down, and a huge greenish-black cauldron was suppressing the surroundings. It was the yin and yang life and death formation and ding of Shenzhou. Before the Grand Imperial Palace was ready, this creation-level magic treasure was still the core of the yin and yang life and death formation. Zhu Yi himself activated the golden bridge of the other shore and stood in front of the claws of the two heavenly dragons. 8 halos of light flashed on the golden bridge. The airflow around Zhu Yi's Dharma body surged and affected the principles of the Great Tao. Then, the airflow shattered together and formed a terrifying power that could destroy the world. The power combined with the golden bridge of the other shore and fought against the Kunlun Dragon King and Shin Dragon King. The yin and yang life and death formation under the control of Ding of Shenzhou was also operating continuously. The majestic power kept increasing, blocking the enemy's way. The Kunlun Dragon King, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. His voice was cold and flat. Kill! He and Shun Dragon King increased their power at the same time, and the waves of demonic power and blood chi surged again. However, at the same time, another voice sounded in the void, Kill! On the golden bridge of the other shore, a tall figure who was sitting cross-legged suddenly stood up. Chapter 1354. Shi Tianhao, who was sitting cross-legged on the Permitha Golden Bridge, suddenly stood up. Above his head, the 12 heavenly generals' spiritual bodies and the 12 golden colossi that were constantly changing between each other also stopped moving. On the other side, in the center of the primordial desolate Tai Chi diagram formed by Shi Tianhao's primordial spirit, a figure of light slowly emerged. It was a figure that was 10 feet tall. This 10 feet tall figure stood in the sky, and countless suns, moons, and stars rose and fell around him. The primordial desolate Tai Chi diagram turned into a stream of light and merged into his body. The face of this figure was surprisingly similar to that of Shi Tianhao. When his eyes opened and closed, endless light flowed around him. Many monsters knelt at his feet, clustered around him, and worshipped him. The huge city in the sky kept changing between a physical body and a spiritual body, silently floating above his head. Shi Tianhao's physical body also opened its eyes at this moment, and light flowed between its pupils. Seeing this scene, the Kuan Dragon King, the Shun Dragon King, and Shi Zhongmao's eyes suddenly froze. They saw that the 10 feet tall figure was Shi Tianhao's void returned Dharma body. However, compared to the others, Shi Tianhao's current state was quite unusual. Most human cultivators would refine their physical bodies into their primordial spirits so that it wouldn't affect their primordial spirit, void return Dharma body, and void return realm. Martial cultivators, on the other hand, would completely merge their primordial spirits with their physical bodies. After forming the void return Dharma body, the Dharma body would also merge with the physical body and further improve. However, Shi Tianhao's situation where his void return Dharma body was completely separated from his physical body, but the two faintly resonated with each other, had never happened before. Right now, Shi Tianhao's physical body wasn't an empty shell. Instead, it was an independent existence with its own consciousness. Under the barren primordial qi, it contained explosive power and a powerful and vigorous life force. The energy waves of his void return Dharma body also shook the void, and it was full of vitality. Did he refine his physical body into a puppet or a clone? Or is it something like a Dharma treasure? When Shi Zhongmao saw this scene, he was bewildered. It looks like the connection between the demon clan's true body and the indestructible demon soul, but it doesn't seem to be the case. What kind of existence is this? Looking at Shi Tianhao's return to void Dharma physique that was vastly different from Zhu Yi's, Shi Zhongmao was extremely perplexed. He then looked at the mysterious Taoist talisman of Yi hovering above Zhu Yi's head and the scroll that his return to void Dharma physique was holding. He could feel the changes within the scroll, the true meaning of all things being derived, and the surging aura of the human Tao, as well as the sound of books being read aloud throughout the ages. He felt as if he had opened up a whole new world of his own. The disciple of the Celestial Gates, sect master, has refined his spirit to return to the void. Both of them have their own unique characteristics. It's truly amazing. Every one of you will embark on the legendary path. Not only that, but it will be a completely different path. If this continues, how far will Xianmen Tianzong develop? Not to mention Shi Zhongmao's astonishment and admiration. The Kunlun Dragon King and the Shun Dragon King, who were at the Dharma ending realm, were even more impressed. The two great monsters of the Dragon Clan had extremely grave expressions on their faces. They could clearly feel that although Shi Tianhao was only at the level of refining his spirit to return to the void, his divine powers and Dharma powers were so powerful that they were not inferior to the human cultivators at the Dharma ending realm. As Shi Tianhao successfully returned to the void, the city in the sky and the blue sky, all heavens array that manifested the 12 heavenly general spiritual bodies became even more powerful. Their auras kept rising, and they were evolving toward the peak of their former glory. Ever since they had obtained the city in the sky and the blue sky, all heavens array, Lin Feng and Shi Tianhao had begun to repair them, and they had invested countless material resources into it. However, the restoration of the city in the sky and the blue sky, all heavens array, was not something that could be done overnight. In addition to replenishing the material resources and refining them again, because of Shi Tianhao's Dharma powers and divine powers, they were also closely related to Shi Tianhao's own cultivation and understanding of the great Tao of heaven and earth. At this moment, as Shi Tianhao made further progress, the power of the city in the sky and the blue sky, all heavens array, also increased significantly. Although the city in the sky still looked dilapidated from the outside, it was no longer in a dilapidated state. Instead, it had recovered a lot, and the whole city had become whole again, and its aura was even more vigorous and powerful. The magnificent city in the sky hovered above the head of Shi Tianhao's 10 feet tall void returned Dharma body, and the 12 heavenly immortal generals' spiritual bodies gradually turned into 12 balls of light, forming a sky-high array formation above his physical body. At this moment, the four powerful existences cooperated with each other. Although they seemed to be independent, they had reached a perfect balance. The surplus and desolation were separated, the chaos was opened, and the creation was transformed. Both the Kunlun Dragon King and the Shun Dragon King could feel that with the help of the city in the sky and the blue sky, all heavens array, the current Shi Tianhao was strong enough to compete with the Dharma ending realm monsters. The light in the eyes of Shi Tianhao's void returned Dharma body and physical body faded away, and their eyes became clear and bright. However, They still looked at the Kunlun Dragon King and the Shun Dragon King with cold eyes. Zhu Yi broke into a smile. Seventh junior brother, congratulations on successfully refining your spirit to return to the void. You have cultivated the body of abundant essence, the body of the god of rage. There are no flaws left. Sure, Tianhao's Ing Yuan and the desolate god nodded together and said, Second senior brother, thank you for protecting me. He looked up at the Kunlun Dragon King and the Shun Dragon King and said coldly, Dragon Tribe, come and fight me. The body of the desolate god that Sure Tianhao refined with his own physical body raised a hand, and a few strands of clear air flowed in the palm, holding a few small fruits. These fruits were called thunder spiritual fruits, which contained spiritual chi of the thunder element. They were edible and could be found in the Purple Cloud Peak of the Purple Cloud sect. However, they were mainly eaten by cultivators below the Yuanying realm to help with their cultivation. For the current Shi Tianhao, these fruits could only be used as a snack. These thunder spiritual fruits have been picked for a long time, but they still retain their vitality and freshness as if they had just been picked. This was the result of Shi Tianhao's own Dharma power. Shi Tianhao's body of the desolate god stared at the Kunlun Dragon King and then opened his mouth to swallow the few small fruits. Then he waved his hand at Ding of Shinzhou and the yin and yang life and death array. Then Ding of Shinzhou flew out of the array and landed on his hand. The violent chi and blood and the power of desolation surged around the body of the desolate god. Then he lifted the huge green and black cauldron that felt like the weight of the entire divine land and smashed it down on the Kunlun Dragon King's head. The huge Ding of Shinzhou grew bigger and bigger in the void, filling up the boundless void as if the real divine land was falling down on the Kunlun Dragon King. The 12 divine gods manifested their spiritual bodies and stretched out their palms together. Together with the body of the desolate god, they lifted Ding of Shinzhou and smashed it down on the Kunlun Dragon King. Meanwhile, Shi Tianhao's body of Ing Yuan took a step forward and fell into the yin and yang life and death array together with the city in the sky. The yin and yang life and death array rotated with a loud rumble, manifesting an infinite amount of light that spread out and swept toward the Kunlun Dragon King like a tide. Wherever the light passed, the void collapsed and was annihilated. For a moment, the whole void battlefield seemed to be shaking violently with Shi Tianhao at the center. Countless void turbulence flowed toward him, but when they approached the center, they could not move forward anymore. This made the void battlefield look like the eye of a huge tornado, where violence and calmness intertwined. The Kunlun Dragon King's expression became extremely solemn, but the coldness and determination in his eyes did not diminish. Instead, there was a tinge of violence in them. He manifested his true form. The scales on his body opened and closed continuously, and the golden dragon aura and auspicious clouds covered the surroundings, preventing Shi Tianhao's attack from getting close. At the same time, he stretched out his claw and swung it in the void, shattering the endless void and colliding with Ding of Shinzhou. Seeing this, Shun Dragon King was ready to go to the Kunlun Dragon King's aid, but Zhu Yi had already activated the golden Nirvana bridge across the void. The vast golden light separated the void, making it impossible for the Kunlun Dragon King and Shun Dragon King to communicate. Although he was not as violent as Shi Tianhao, Zhu Yi's eyes did not have the slightest bit of warmth. He blocked Shun Dragon King and prevented him from helping the Kunlun Dragon King. The primordial celestial dragons were indeed powerful. Although Shun Dragon King had just entered the Dharma-ending realm not long ago, his supernatural powers and demonic powers were not to be underestimated. Especially in terms of the total amount of demonic powers, it seemed to be endless and majestic like the sea. Even the Kunlun Dragon King could not compare to him. If Zhu Yi fought with all his might, he would not be at a disadvantage. But now, he still had to take care of preventing the Kunlun Dragon King from meeting up with him, so he had to be more careful. However, on the other side, the Kunlun Dragon King was in a worse situation. Shi Tianhao and Ing Yuan Aragami came out together, activating Ding of Shinjo, Yin and Yang Life and Death Formation, Sky City, and Azure Heaven Formation, suppressing the Kunlun Dragon King with a series of fierce attacks. Even though the Kunlun Dragon King had been in the Dharma-ending realm for many years and had extraordinary strength, at this moment, he was being suppressed by Shi Tianhao to the point that he could hardly breathe. If it was not for the primordial celestial dragon race's powerful natural powers, he would not have been able to hold on for long and would have died. Even though the Kunlun Dragon King's body was extremely strong, at this moment, he was in a difficult situation. His body was surrounded by the majestic dragon might and golden light, but it was more focused on the Jiao Dragon race's space shifting, the Candle Dragon race's time manipulation, and the White Jade Dragon race's fickle and real power conception. He was fighting against Shi Tianhao's violent attacks. While fighting against Shun Dragon King, Zhu Yi said unhurriedly, "Junior Martial Brother." He was injured by Master back then, so his demonic powers could not burst out continuously in the peak state. At the same time, his dragon tail and one of his dragon claws were chopped off, which were also his weaknesses. Without a dragon claw, his close combat ability would be weakened, and without a dragon tail, it would not be convenient for him to move in the void. At the same time, although his demonic powers are still vast and vigorous, because of the loss of a dragon claw and a dragon tail, he is not as strong as he was in his peak state. You can continue to strengthen your attacks, especially by increasing your speed and using rapid attacks to overwhelm him. Or you can slowly wear him down until he is exhausted. With the 4 powers of Ding of Shinjo, the Yin and Yang Life and Death Formation, the City in the Sky, and the Blue Sky All Heavens Formation, he will not be able to defeat you. Zhu Yi said unhurriedly, "For this battle, you can fight however you want." He didn't hide his voice from the 2 demonic dragons and Shi Zhongmao. Shi Zhongmao was slightly surprised, while the anger in the Kunlun Dragon King's eyes grew stronger and Shin Dragon King's expression became more serious. At this moment, the immortal Dragon City, which was supposed to be the focus of everyone's attention, was temporarily ignored by everyone. As time went by, the light above the immortal Dragon City became brighter and brighter, and the fluctuation of it became clearer and clearer. The huge Great Wall suddenly moved in the void. Chapter 1355. The light above the immortal Dragon City burned brighter and brighter. Rolling golden light shone from the Great Wall and enveloped it. The misty light that seemed like the river of time gradually faded under the golden light. The entire Great Wall was like a giant dragon that had suddenly come alive. It swayed in the endless void, and deafening dragon roars came from it. Because of Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao, Great Qin's Rock Sun King Shi Zhongmao, who wasn't attacked by the dragon race experts, looked at this scene with a complicated expression. When Kunlun Dragon King and Shun Dragon King heard the dragon roars, their expressions didn't improve. Instead, they became even more serious, and the anger in their eyes burned even brighter. A giant golden dragon light shadow appeared in the sky above the immortal Dragon City. It was so huge that it couldn't be any bigger. Its body disappeared in the void, and it gave off the feeling that the dragon could only see its head but not its tail. That giant body rose and fell in the dark void, appearing and disappearing. It was like a dragon in the clouds, and it was hard to catch its trace. And on the top of the immortal Dragon City's city wall, a figure gradually appeared in the golden light. However, this figure wasn't the manifestation of Emperor Shi Huang's heroic spirit. Instead, it was a yellow-clothed woman who looked to be in her 20s. She was beautiful and elegant. The yellow-clothed woman sat cross-legged on the top of the immortal Dragon City's city wall. Her eyes were closed, and she seemed to be in a deep sleep. The giant golden dragon light shadow above her head finally revealed its complete and huge figure in the dark void. It shook the surroundings, and then it landed on the immortal Dragon City below. This golden dragon light shadow merged with the immortal Dragon City's city wall, and the immortal Dragon City suddenly shook. The city wall was swallowed by the golden light, and then it completely disappeared. The giant dragon's figure also disappeared. In the dark void, only a golden light beam could be seen passing through the void on both sides. It was like a long river, and it flashed with light silently. In this long golden river, countless figures kept rising and falling. Some were determined, some were unyielding, some were angry, some were fearful, some were domineering, and some were dignified. In the long river, silhouettes rose from it, then slowly fell, and finally completely merged into the long river. At the same time, the silhouettes of true dragons could be seen in the golden river. They rushed out of the river and circled in the air before returning to the river. The Kuan Dragon King and the Shun Dragon King trembled slightly when they saw that. They could feel waves of energy coming from the depths of their demon souls that made their hearts palpitate. The silhouettes of humans and dragons interweaved, rising and falling. That golden river seemed to have given birth to countless lives and annihilated countless lives. In the dark void, a golden Milky Way stretched across the starry sky. The silhouettes of the dragons and humans were like resplendent stars, reflecting off each other. In the end, the long river of golden light gradually retracted. After the golden light became a little thinner, the huge object under the golden light gradually revealed its true appearance. It was a gigantic dragon. The golden scales on its body opened and closed as if they were breathing, and a large number of golden, auspicious clouds emerged from within. This heavenly dragon was incomparably huge and awe-inspiring, as if it was the beginning of all things. As it hovered in the void, not only did it completely fill up the vast space, but it also gave off a wonderful feeling that its body had enveloped the endless void. Although its eyes were closed and it seemed to have no aura, it still gave off a strong sense of awe. As the dragon's body hovered and swayed in the void, under the golden auspicious clouds, it seemed to gradually form a mysterious Tao character. Although the huge dragon's eyes were closed, it was still staring at Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao, and the Kuan Dragon King and Shun Dragon King, who were fighting fiercely. The Kuan Dragon King and the Shun Dragon King looked at the golden heavenly dragon in front of them, and they couldn't help but show sadness and anger on their faces. Their eyes were fixed on the top of the dragon's head, in between the two horns. Silently, the woman in yellow was still sitting there with her legs crossed. At this moment, her eyes finally opened slowly. As she opened her eyes, a layer of misty light appeared on the body of the golden dragon again. It was like a passing river, and time flew. The misty light covered the entire body of the golden dragon, causing it to be shrouded in a layer of light fog. It became mysterious and unpredictable again. The void was blurry and chaotic. Everything seemed to be shrouded in a grayish-white world. Time stopped flowing, but it also seemed to be constantly changing, as if an instant was eternal. Only the figure of the woman in yellow was still clear. Her color was distinct, and the grayish-white blur brought a touch of color to the changing world. It was as if she had added the finishing touch to the dragon, making it eye-catching. However, if one looked closely, they would realize that the woman in yellow was only a manifestation of spirit and not a real body of flesh and blood. The great Qin monarch, Shi Zhongmao, looked at the woman in yellow and sighed. "Xingyun, it's been a long time." This woman was the former princess of the great Qin dynasty, Shi Xingyun. Back then, she was reincarnated as a human from Tianlong Jin's remnant soul. Because of this, her father, Stonefeather, used the dragon soul sacrifice and merged with the immortal dragon city. She fell into the void along with the immortal dragon city. Back then, because she hadn't reached the nascent soul realm, Stonefeather forced her to perform the dragon soul sacrifice. As a result, something unexpected happened, and Stonefeather lost his life because of it. Shi Xingyun opened her eyes. Her gaze was as calm as water, and it was similar to the light of the river of time around her. It was as if she could see through the changes of the sea. She looked at Shi Zhongmao and smiled. "Long time no see, Royal Grand Uncle Monarch Yang." "Greetings, Xingyun." Shi Zhongmao looked at Shi Xingyun and sighed. Everything is fate. I don't have the face to ask you to return to the great Qin dynasty. I only hope that you, sigh. Shi Xingyun smiled and shook her head. What are you talking about, Royal Grand Uncle Monarch Yang? I'm a human, not a dragon. I can't work with the Xianhai Dragon Clan. I'm afraid they want to get rid of me. The Kunlun Dragon King and the Shun Dragon King snorted and didn't say anything. Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao also looked at Shi Xingyun. They said together, "Congratulations, Princess Xingyun." Shi Xingyun's expression was calm. She smiled and said, "My friends, how have you been?" She turned to the restless Shi Zhongmao and said, "Royal Grand Uncle Monarch Yang, you don't have to worry about me holding a grudge. I can feel that my father is dead, and I won't take my anger out on others. However, the high-level cultivators of the Great Qin dynasty knew about this plan, so I don't want to return to the West Hill City. Please forgive me, Royal Grand Uncle Monarch Yang." Shi Zhongmao sighed. "We're doing this for the Great Qin dynasty. We don't have any selfish motives. Now that you've been reborn, if you want to return to the West Hill City, we'll welcome you with open arms." He paused for a while and said in a deep voice, "You're also the direct descendant of the former emperor. It's not impossible for you to inherit the throne." The cultivation world in the Divine Land was different from the secular world. There had been empresses in the cultivation dynasties. Shi Xingyun shook her head. "Royal Grand Uncle Monarch Yang, please don't joke around. Since you're here, it means that Royal Grand Uncle Nanming has inherited the throne. My father passed away during the war between the two worlds. The immortal dragon city was lost, and the situation was urgent. I don't think my brother can shoulder this burden. The new emperor should have been on the throne for a long time, right?" Shi Zhongmao said calmly and confidently, "His Majesty will also agree to pass the throne to you." Shi Xingyun looked at Shi Zhongmao silently. After making eye contact with him, she shook her head and said, "I'm not interested in this. Royal Grand Uncle Monarch Yang, you're worrying too much." Shi Zhongmao smiled bitterly. "This is a huge matter, and it involves His Majesty." "I'm not trying to test you," Shi Xingyun interrupted. "Royal Grand Uncle Monarch Yang, there's no need to say more. Let's focus on the matter at hand." She looked at the Kuan Dragon King and the Shun Dragon King and said lightly, "You too. Although I've recovered part of Tian Long Jin's memory, I've already reincarnated as a human. Although the dragon soul and the human soul are interdependent, after this tribulation, the dragon soul and the human soul have completely separated. Now that the dragon soul has completely merged with the dragon body, the human soul in front of you is the only soul left. We're not on the same path. You want to get rid of me, and I don't want to sit still and wait for death. Sorry for offending you today." After saying that, Shi Xingyun pointed her finger lightly. The misty light in the void dispersed and rushed toward the Kuan Dragon King and the Shun Dragon King like a river of time. The huge heavenly dragon unfolded its body. Under the cover of the watery light, the mighty dragon might still emerged. It let out a long roar and grabbed the Kuan Dragon King and the Shun Dragon King with its two dragon claws. The two great monsters of the dragon clan roared angrily at the same time. The immortal dragon city no longer existed, and Shi Xingyun had been reborn as a dragon. Before this, her cultivation was still limited. Although the power of the dragon body was strong, her soul was not strong enough to control it completely. However, her magical powers were not to be underestimated. Now that she had joined the battle, the two powerful monsters of the dragon clan who were already at a disadvantage felt even more pressured. At the same time, her joining the battle made the two great monsters of the dragon clan even angrier. Although the Kuan Dragon King was in a dangerous situation, his aura was getting more and more violent. He started to attack Shi Xingyun without caring if he was injured or not. At this moment, he was willing to exchange injuries for injuries, or even his life for Shi Xingyun's life, just to kill Shi Xingyun. Although the Shin Dragon King was also furious, his mind was still calm. She didn't need to do it herself. She knew she would become our primary target. She did it on purpose. She used herself as a bait to provoke us to lose our cool and fight to the death. She then worked with the people of Xianmen Tianzong to kill us all. After understanding the key point, the Shun Dragon King quickly calmed down and regained his composure. The way he looked at Shi Xingyun became even colder. Although he wanted to destroy her completely, the Shun Dragon King managed to control his emotions. A strange pattern flashed on his forehead. The pattern instantly covered his entire body, and it then emitted a dazzling light. Within the light, there was a boundless black light. The color of the sea was pure gold, and the waves were sparkling. It was the mysterious sea controlled by the Dragon Clan. Chapter 1356. Strange runes flickered on Shun Dragon King's forehead, guiding the power of the Xian Sea to the battlefield in the void. Then, golden light flashed all over his body, and he turned into a golden line that shuttled through the void toward Kuan Dragon King. Zhu Yi's attack landed heavily on Shun Dragon King's body, and the golden line trembled in the air, almost shattering into pieces. A large amount of dragon scales and dragon blood splattered in the void. Enduring Zhu Yi's attack, Shun Dragon King gritted his teeth and approached the battlefield between Kuan Dragon King and Shi Tianhao. Shi Tianhao didn't refuse anyone. With his body of abundant essence, he activated the city in the sky to suppress the yin and yang life and death array and unleash the power of the reversal of two polarities. Shun Dragon King didn't waste any time. Instead, he endured the damage caused by the power of desolation and broke through Shi Tianhao's defense to regroup with Kuan Dragon King. Behind him, Zhu Yi activated the Golden Permitha Bridge and chased after him. His return to Void Stage Dharma body merged with the Permitha Bridge, and he transformed into a towering giant. He stretched out his hand and directly grabbed onto Shun Dragon King's dragon tail. On the other side, Kuan Dragon King ignored Shi Tianhao's threat and clawed at Shi Xingyun. Shi Xingyun's divine soul merged with the dragon body below him, and the dragon also reached out its claws to block Kuan Dragon King's attack. Shi Xingyun retreated in defeat. Kuan Dragon King wanted to chase after him, but Shi Tianhao's body of the God of Rage had already lifted Ding of Shenzhou and smashed it down toward him. Kuan Dragon King roared angrily and raised his huge dragon head to block Ding of Shenzhou. However, the 12 divine generals' spiritual bodies controlled by Shi Tianhao's God of Rage had all turned into 12 heavy golden statues and landed on Ding of Shenzhou. The 12 metal colossi were even thicker and more condensed than the city in the sky at this moment. It was as if they could suppress the fate energy of the earth, and they complemented Ding of Shenzhou perfectly. Under the control of Shi Tianhao, they pressed down together, and even the Kunlun King felt his head getting heavy. Just as the Kunlun Dragon King's body paused for a moment, Shi Tianhao's abundant essence body activated the yin and yang life and death formation and launched another attack. At the same time, a dazzling divine light emerged from the glabella of his abundant essence body. It shook the heaven and earth and shattered the void. Wherever the divine light reached, it seemed to draw a full stop for everything. The Kunlun Dragon King's body was frozen by Ding of Shenzhou and the 12 golden men, and he was busy wrestling with them. The protective golden light around his body was wrapped up by the power of the yin and yang life and death formation and the city in the sky. Even the defensive power of his scales, which were formed by the Black Dragon Clan's incantation refining method, was affected. Many of the incantations on his scales became messy. At this moment, Shi Tianhao's divine light of finality swept across the void. It immediately cut open a large piece of dragon might and left a bloody wound on the Kunlun Dragon King's body. He roared. Among the golden dragon might and the auspicious clouds, stars rose and twinkled. The starlight and the golden light merged into one. The huge body twisted crazily in the void. The Kunlun Dragon King exerted all his strength and pushed Ding of Shenzhou away with his head. He swung his bear tail forcefully at the yin and yang life and death formation, forcing it to retreat. Once again, A large amount of blood splattered from his tail. 3 claws waved in the void, tearing the space apart and blocking Tianhao's follow-up attacks. Although he was enraged, the Kunlun Dragon King had experienced many battles and his senses were extremely sharp. His body turned into a golden light and flashed across the void, narrowly dodging a grayish-white dragon claw that was shrouded by a misty glow. That was Shi Xingyun's second attack. If he was caught by her claw, even though the Kunlun Dragon King possessed the magical power of time manipulation, he would inevitably fall into a state of stagnation in the air. If that happened, he would have to face Tianhao's torrential attacks again. At this point in the battle, the Kunlun Dragon King had lost all hope of winning. However, when he looked at Shi Xingyun, his anger, shame, resentment, and hatred had reached its peak. He had made up his mind that he would kill this existence, which was a great humiliation to the dragon race, even if he had to die. However, at this moment, Shun Dragon King paid the price of getting even more injured. He forcefully broke free from Zhu Yi's grasp and rushed to the front of the Kunlun Dragon King. He said in a deep voice, "Let's go. That woman is using herself as a bait to lure us to stay here and fight to the death. She wants to surround us with Xianmin, Tianzong, and kill us here." The Kunlun Dragon King roared angrily, "I know. However, even if they can surround and kill me, I'll still bite this bait into pieces today. I can't let her live in this world." In his eyes, the anger and hatred had all turned into ice-cold, murderous intent. "Even if the master of Xian Gate comes personally, I won't let this matter rest. At most, I'll die. I've already retreated twice, and I don't want to suffer the same humiliation again. This time, I won't retreat. I'll fight to the death." The power of the mysterious sea drawn by the picture on Shun Dragon King's forehead had already been completely unleashed. It pierced through the space passage, and seawater gushed out from it. The ritual began to pull Shun Dragon King's body back into the mysterious sea. He looked at the Kunlun Dragon King, who had completely ignored the existence of Tianhao and Zhu Yi and was only focused on Shi Xingyun. He let out a long roar and said, "Xianmin Tianzong is powerful, and the Yudu race has returned to the boundless universe. The situation is changing rapidly, and it's even more difficult than before. We have to think about the continuation and development of our race." As Shun Dragon King spoke, the picture on his forehead flashed again. A black light shot out and landed on the body of the Kunlun Dragon King. The Kunlun Dragon King's body trembled, and the same picture appeared on his forehead. The picture transformed into an illusion of light and shadow, which also connected to the mysterious sea. A majestic force traveled through the endless void and came to the empty sea, trying to pull the Kunlun Dragon King back into the mysterious sea. The Kunlun Dragon King let out a deafening roar, and rays of golden light shone continuously around his body. He was actually fighting against the mysterious sea receiving ritual. At the same time, Tianhao's attack came again, and it was even fiercer than before. Zhu Yi's movement paused slightly, and the talisman of changes above his head continued to deduce changes. It's not like last time, when the ritual was unstable because the inside of the mysterious sea was fighting against the strong practitioners of the Haoyan Mirror and Taishi Temple. This time, the mysterious sea receiving ritual is perfect and flawless. However, this is the void battlefield after all. The space and time are extremely chaotic. Even the power of the mysterious sea is unable to move freely. The power of the ritual is far less powerful than in the boundless world. His eyes flashed, and the rays of light in front of him became clear and dazzling. The mist gradually dissipated. The giant formed by the fusion of the Dharma body of the void returned, and the golden bridge of the Permethar realm let go of Shun Dragon King and flashed to the side of the Kunlun Dragon King. Then he punched at the spot where the Kunlun Dragon King and the mysterious sea receiving ritual were connected. The Xian Sea receiving ritual, which was already repelling the Kunlun Dragon King, became unstable instantly. The Kunlun Dragon King's body was about to return to the world of the void battlefield. The Kunlun Dragon King turned a blind eye to this. As he roared, a large amount of golden flames and lightning shot out from his mouth, intertwining with each other and rushing toward Shi Xingyun. At this moment, Shi Xingyun didn't take the initiative to fight the Kunlun Dragon King. Instead, he retreated and dodged the attacks. Shi Tianhao's body of the god of desolation and the 12 heavenly generals lifted the cauldron of Ding of Shenzhou and aimed the mouth of the cauldron at the Kunlun Dragon King. Then, the cauldron, which looked like a creation, swallowed the dragon flame and thunder fire that the Kunlun Dragon King spat out. Meanwhile, his body of the abundant essence activated the yin and yang life and death array. The array spun rapidly, and the city in the sky in the center of the array gradually turned into a shining city. This shining city absorbed the spiritual power from the array and strengthened itself. Gradually, the city began to change into a shining pagoda. This pagoda didn't seem to have any layers. It was a complete whole, and its shape was hard to describe. However, as it stood there, it seemed to be able to suppress the heavens and change the moon and stars. The magic power of Shi Tianhao's body of the abundant essence kept evolving. Within the vigorous life force, there was a chaotic blur and the true meaning of desolation and primeval. When the true meaning of desolation was added to the pagoda, the entire pagoda started to show signs of desolation. Shi Tianhao pushed the yin and yang life and death array and the pagoda. He followed closely behind Zhu Yi and landed at the point where the Xianxi light and shadow illusionary realm connected with the Kunlun Dragon King's body. Instantly, the Kunlun Dragon King was freed from the Xianxi light and shadow illusionary realm and returned to the void battlefield. However, at this moment, the Xianxi light and shadow illusionary realm suddenly shook, and a golden haze appeared all over the sky. It passed through the Xianxi realm and rushed into the void battlefield. Then, Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao saw a huge dragon claw reach out from the haze. It rolled up the water of Xianxi and grabbed the Kunlun Dragon King's body. Tenryu Jian. Everyone shouted in unison. The Kunlun Dragon King also shouted in surprise. Yuan. There was no response from the golden haze. Streams of golden seawater that flashed with black light spread out from the huge dragon claw and wrapped around the Kunlun Dragon King's body, pulling him back. When the water of the Xianxi flowed into the empty sea, the earth-shattering power was like two worlds colliding with each other. The space in the void battlefield seemed to be on the verge of being torn apart. Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao frowned slightly as they looked at the surging Xianxi and the huge dragon claw. At this moment, in the divine land of the boundless world, at the northern foot of the Kunlun mountain range, in the Xintian time cave on the Jade Capital Mountain, Lin Feng's main body was calmly looking at Zhu Yi's Hao Yang clone. Zhu Yi's Hao Yang clone looked at Lin Feng and asked, "Master." Lin Feng nodded and pointed a finger at the forehead of Zhu Yi's Hao Yang clone. Zhu Yi's Hao Yang clone closed his eyes and his body trembled slightly. In the void battlefield, there seemed to be a faint light extending from Hao Yang's clone. It extended infinitely into the distance, passing through layers of time and space and connecting with Zhu Yi's main body in the void battlefield. Lin Feng tilted his head slightly and called out softly, "Xianli." Xianli, who was behind him, did not say a word. She stepped out of the Xintian time cave and stood in the void battlefield. She raised her right hand, and light flowed in her palm and formed a long sword. Then she slashed down with the sword. A blurry and ferocious sword light followed the light connecting Zhu Yi's Hao Yang clone and his main body and descended into the void battlefield. As soon as the sword light appeared, the entire void battlefield was filled with cracks. It was as if doomsday had arrived. The Kunlun Dragon King and Shun Dragon King's expressions changed at the same time. In the mysterious sea, the Yuan Dragon King let out a muffled groan. The golden seawater on his claw that was flashing with black light suddenly changed color and turned into a golden black sea. He grabbed the Kunlun Dragon King and Shun Dragon King and quickly retreated into the mysterious sea. However, the sword light had already landed. Instantly, golden dragon blood splattered everywhere, and the golden light and black sea were split apart. A terrible wound was left on the Yuan Dragon King's claw. Even the Kunlun Dragon King, who was in his claw, was severely injured. In the depths of the mysterious sea, a painful roar sounded. However, the dragon claw did not dare to stay there any longer. It hurriedly returned into the mysterious sea, and the light and shadow illusion also disappeared. You are lucky. This time you're in the void battlefield, and I am in the boundless world. Lin Feng's voice traveled through the void battlefield and also into the mysterious sea, echoing leisurely. I have said that if you dare to leave the mysterious sea, I will kill you. Even if you stretch out a claw, you will not be able to. Chapter 1357. The void battlefield was a mess at the moment. Due to the influx of Xianxi water and the terrifying world-destroying sharpness of the sky-crushing sword, the entire empty sea was stirred up by endless void storms that wreaked havoc. On the Jade Capital Mountain, Xian Li returned to the dark heaven time, light, grotto heaven. Her expression remained unchanged, and she stood behind Lin Feng without saying a word. Lin Feng sat with his legs crossed and leaned against the small dark heaven treasure tree in the grotto heaven. He closed his eyes and said to Zhu Yi's Hao Yang clone, "You guys handle the rest." Hao Yang's clone's face was pale, and his spirit was shaken. The image of the devastating sword light kept circling in his mind. He calmed himself down and bowed to Lin Feng. "Yes, master. I understand." In the void battlefield, Zhu Yi controlled the Permitha bridge and tried his best to stabilize himself in the chaotic void. On the other side, Shi Tianhao, who was being suppressed by Ding of Shenzhou and Sky City, also stabilized himself. At the same time, he had to take care of Shi Zhongmao, the king of the Great Qin dynasty. The waves in the void battlefield were too shocking. They had not been like this for many years. The scale and power were far greater than before. Even Shi Zhongmao, who was at the Dao integration stage, had to be careful. Without Shi Tianhao's help, even if he could protect himself, he would be swept away by the void turbulence. On the other side, Shi Xingyun did not try to stabilize herself. Instead, she went with the flow and allowed the void turbulence to engulf her. She only paid attention to protecting herself. She smiled and looked at Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao, and Shi Zhongmao. Was that sect leader Lin's technique? Sect leader Lin's cultivation base is astonishing. It's amazing. Zhu Yi's reply was neither humble nor arrogant. He said, "My master's technique is not something I can describe." Shi Zhongmao looked at Shi Xingyun with a complicated expression. "Xingyun, where do you want to go next?" Shi Xingyun replied, "No matter how big the world is, there will always be a place for me to hide. The dragon race is a huge threat, but I've completely removed the mark left behind by the Kuan Dragon King after my rebirth. If I keep a low profile, the dragon race won't be able to find me. You don't have to worry, Imperial Granduncle Gunyang. Consider this old man's previous proposal." Shi Zhongmao sighed. "Or we can go back to West Hill City first. You can take your time to think about it." With Shi Xingyun's current strength, even if she were to return to West Hill City, as long as she wanted to leave, the Qin dynasty would not be able to stop her. Hearing this, Shi Xingyun smiled. "Once my condition has stabilized, I'll look for an opportunity to return to see my mother, my brother, and Jingyan." Her mother was a concubine of Stone Feather. Although she was only in the golden elixir period, she had lived for 1,000 years and was still alive. The brother Shi Xingyun was referring to was none other than the crown prince of the Great Qin dynasty, Shi Chongyan. Although Shi Jingyun was born to another concubine of Stone Feather, Shi Xingyun had practically watched her grow up. The two sisters were very close. Hearing that Shi Xingyun did not mention him, Shi Zongtong, or the other members of the imperial family, Shi Zhongmao could not help but smile bitterly. He said, "West Hills City will naturally welcome you back at any time. Imperial Granduncle Gunyong, you don't have to worry. Shi Xingyun said, just now you tried to stop me from waking up and wanted to keep the immortal Dragon City. I can understand that. After all, I don't know what I'm thinking, and I might even hate you. It's more beneficial for the great Qin dynasty to take back the immortal Dragon City safely. Hearing this, the complicated look in Shi Zhongmao's eyes became even more intense. Shi Xingyun continued, I can understand that, and I won't hold it against you. However, I won't be returning to the great Qin dynasty. Please understand, Imperial Granduncle Gunyong, and help me convey this to His Majesty. Hearing this, Shi Zhongmao knew that Shi Xingyun had already made up her mind. At least, she would not change her mind in the short term. As such, he could only keep quiet and sigh helplessly. For the current divine land, the ancient dynasty had Gu Jun, an initial tribulation stage powerhouse, and a longevity lotus throne, a creation artifact. The power of the ancient dynasty alone was superior to the combined forces of Great Zhou, Great Qin, and the Northern Militant. With the Taishu Temple and the Mount Shu sword sect seal their mountains, and Xianmin Tianzong had no intention of directly interfering, it would be a lie to say that the Great Qin dynasty did not feel pressured by the ancient dynasty. If they could take back the immortal Dragon City, the Great Qin dynasty would at least have nothing to worry about when facing the ancient dynasty. All the pressure would be shifted to Great Zhou and the Northern Militant. Now that there was no hope of taking back the immortal Dragon City, they could only hope that Shi Xingyun herself would return. Shi Zhongmao was not making empty promises. Shi Xingyun was currently the most powerful person in the Great Qin dynasty. If she returned, even if she really became the empress, the entire Great Qin dynasty would accept her. The only person who might have some thoughts would be the new emperor of the Great Qin dynasty, Shi Zhongtong. However, with the current external environment and the immense pressure, it was more likely that Shi Zhongtong would step down. The succession of the empress in the cultivation world was more or less different from that in the secular world. Of course, a Confucian scholar like Zhu Hongwu would never accept a woman taking over the throne. Even if the empress was more powerful, he would still oppose it. However, for the Great Qin dynasty, as long as Shi Xingyun was willing to return, they were willing to accept her ascension to the throne. After failing to stop Shi Xingyun from awakening, Shi Zhongmao almost instantly thought through the problem and communicated with Shi Xingyun, showing the greatest sincerity of the Great Qin dynasty. Purely from the perspective of gains and losses, returning to the Great Qin dynasty was an excellent choice for Shi Xingyun. The Great Qin dynasty was like a centipede that died, but did not fall down. Even though its vitality was greatly damaged, its foundation was still there. It had all sorts of resources. If it could rest in peace and withstand the current pressure, it could still achieve great things in the future. The abundant resources were also beneficial for Shi Xingyun's personal cultivation, and she could further increase her strength. If she became the ruler of a country, she would be able to allocate these resources with greater ease. However, what made Shi Zhongmao sigh was that Shi Xingyun was still unwilling to return to the Great Qin dynasty. Most importantly, Shi Zhongmao could tell that Shi Xingyun was not putting on airs to ask for more benefits. Instead, he did not want to do so. This made Shi Zhongmao feel even more discouraged. He was not afraid of demanding an exorbitant price, but he was afraid that he would not even have the mood to negotiate. He was not afraid of Shi Xingyun's harsh conditions, but Shi Xingyun did not want to negotiate at all. At this moment, Shi Zhongmao could only think about having a serious discussion with Shi Xingyun's mother, his brother Shi Chongyun, and Shi Jingyun after returning to West Hill City. He would then try to communicate with Shi Xingyun when he returned to West Hill City to visit his family. Moreover, he needed to have a serious discussion with the current Great Qin Emperor Shi Zhongtong. Shi Zhongmao, who had come to the battlefield of the outer dimension with high spirits, but returned in disappointment, could only comfort himself with a bitter smile. At least the dragon tribe has suffered a heavy blow. The pressure from the monster tribe has been reduced once again. I don't have to think about it for the time being. Shi Xingyun's divine soul sat cross-legged on the giant dragon's head. The giant dragon's body gradually disappeared into the void turbulence. She smiled and cupped her hands at Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao. Thanks to your protection today, I was able to escape from the claws of the Kuan Dragon King and the Shen Dragon King. Farewell. I hope we will meet again. I will personally visit the Kunlun mountain range to express my gratitude to faction leader Lin. I hope we can meet again then. Zhu Yi said, You're too kind, Brother Xingyun. We welcome you at any time. Shi Tianhao smiled and said, The most suitable place for you to cultivate is the desolate ancient Star Ocean. Shi Xingyun smiled and said, I wouldn't dare to dream of that. Please send my regards to your master, Senior Lin. We will meet again. As he spoke, Shi Xingyun's divine soul, along with his dragon body, disappeared into the turbulence of the void. They instantly passed through the layers of the void and disappeared without a trace. Zhu Yi turned to look at Shi Zhongmao and said, King Gunyong, please forgive us. It's not convenient for us to intervene in this matter. Shi Zhongmao nodded with a bitter smile and said, Of course. He sighed and could not calm down for a long time. When the void turbulence finally calmed down, Shi Zhongmao said goodbye to Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao and quickly returned to the divine land of the boundless world. Although he had returned empty-handed, there was still hope. For the great Qin dynasty, the high-level cultivators needed to carefully plan how to develop the great Qin dynasty in the future. Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao were not in a hurry to leave. Shi Tianhao's Ying Yuan and the desolate god sat cross-legged in the void again. Silently, they recuperated and stabilized their cultivation base. He had just successfully refined his spirit to revert to the void, and he had immediately thrown himself into the battle with the Kunlun King. Now, he needed to stabilize his foundation and also organize the rewards he had gained from the battle. In this way, his cultivation would be smoother and he would gain more rewards. Zhu Yi stood silently on the Permitha Golden Bridge to protect his junior brother. He looked at the battlefield in the void in front of him with rays of light swirling in his eyes. He had already retracted his void restoration physique. However, the Dao talisman appeared in his eyes again. Silently, the Dao talisman suddenly shot out a few golden rays of light. The rays of light streaked across the dark void in front of him and formed a light shadow. The light shadow looked disjointed and incomplete. It looked very simple and crude. However, one could vaguely tell that it was a majestic and mighty true dragon. Zhu Yi's eyes flickered slightly. The concept of the power of the primordial celestial dragon is indeed profound. However, it is getting clearer and clearer. He stood with his hands behind his back and looked at the golden dragon light shadow in front of him carefully. After a while, he shook his head slightly and the light shadow dissipated. He turned to look at Shi Tianhao. Above the head of Shi Tianhao's desolate god, 12 light shadows were constantly changing between the 12 heavenly generals' spiritual bodies and the 12 golden men. On the head of his Ying Yuan body, there was an indescribably profound light tower that was constantly changing between the tower and the majestic city in the sky. Abstruse concepts flowed out from Shi Tianhao's body. Desolation and creation, chaos and creation. Between the changes, there was a mutual connection between them. After a while, Shi Tianhao's desolate god and Ying Yuan body opened their eyes at the same time. Then, they stood up and took a step forward together. The two of them stood side by side, and both of them were walking forward. They were supposed to be absolutely parallel to each other, and there was no possibility of them crossing each other. However, with this step, Shi Tianhao's desolate god and Ying Yuan merged into one. Even the city in the sky above his head and the 12 heavenly generals' spiritual bodies merged again, turning into a majestic city surrounded by layers of light shadows. Chapter 1358. Zhu Yi smiled at Shi Tianhao and said, This matter is over. Let's go back to the mountain. Shi Tianhao kept the yin and yang life and death formation, as well as the divine prefecture cauldron. The body of surplus Yuan that was 100 feet tall had completely merged with his body of the desolate god and returned to his original appearance. He jumped onto the Permitha Golden Bridge and smiled. Let's go. With a thought from Zhu Yi, the Permitha Golden Bridge turned into a golden rainbow and flashed across the endless dark void, disappearing in an instant. The two returned to the Divine Land and returned to Kunlun Mountain Range's Yujing Mountain. Zhu Yi looked at the Xiantian treasure tree that covered the sky at the top of the mountain and turned to Shi Tianhao and said, "Third junior brother is cultivating on the Xiantian treasure tree now. You should go with him. Master Xianmin heavenly escape as soon as possible. Even if you don't have the treasure of creation with you in the future, you will have more ways to deal with the powerhouses in the Dharma ending realm." Shi Tianhao immediately nodded. "I have the same intention. Otherwise, I will stay in the void battlefield and continue looking for Grandpa." As the two of them were talking, their expressions suddenly changed slightly. Turning their heads to the side, they saw a high-spirited, burly man dressed in black scale armor standing there. Beside the burly man stood a beautiful woman with a tall figure and a heroic temperament. They were the husband and wife Jieyu and Bai Guang who resided in the celestial sect of Xianmen. When they saw Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao, they came up together and saluted. "Greetings, Master. Greetings, Heavenly Emperor Huang." Shi Tianhao smiled and said, "You guys have come out of seclusion? Seems like you have gained a lot. You're only one step away from achieving the indestructible demon soul." Although Jieyu and White Light in front of him had not taken the last step to achieve the indestructible demon soul, they had already reached the peak of the late Demon King stage. They were only a step away from pushing the last door. Jieyu, on the other hand, did not smile. Instead, his face was filled with sorrow. It's all thanks to sect masters nurturing over the years the supply of all kinds of precious resources and the guidance in the cultivation of Tao techniques that I could reach this step in such a short period of time. If I were the Grand Supreme Dragon Pool, I would be satisfied to be able to form a demon nascent soul and stabilize my realm in just a few decades. White Light stood by his side, looking at his husband with a smile, and did not speak. In fact, for her, the speed of her progress in Xianmen Tianzong was beyond imagination. Even though she was far more valued than Jieyu in the Supreme Dragon Pool and had a higher aptitude, it was still faster than expected for her to advance from the early stage of the Demon King to the peak of the late stage of the Demon King in such a short time. Zhu Yi said, "There's no need to say more about the difficulty of the primordial spirit. Don't be impatient. Focus on cultivating, and success will come naturally." Jieyu and White Light husband and wife nodded in unison. Of course. Within one of Zhu Yi's eyes, brilliance circulated. A golden ray of light shot out, quickly outlining in the void in front of him, forming a golden dragon silhouette. Even though it was incomplete, it already revealed an awe-inspiring majesty. The eyes of that heavenly dragon silhouette flashing with golden light met with Jieyu and White Light husband and wife. There seemed to be an additional bit of vigor in its pupils. A deafening dragon roar resounded in the ears of the dragon race husband and wife. Jieyu and White Light both trembled violently, staring blankly at the heavenly dragon silhouette in front of them, only feeling dizzy in their minds. There were countless images rising and falling, tumbling nonstop. Zhu Yi's fingers lightly tapped twice in the air. Then that heavenly dragon silhouette split into two, turning into two streams of light, falling into the glabella of Jieyu and White Light. Jieyu and White Light let out dragon roars in unison. They were actually unable to maintain their transformed human forms. Instead, they manifested their true forms together, transforming into two dragons, one black and one white. An armored black dragon and a white jade dragon circled continuously above Jade Capital Mountain, letting out a series of long roars. In their eyes, there was a golden brilliance flickering nonstop. Faintly, golden dragon silhouettes could be seen dancing on their bodies. After a long while, Jieyu and White Light settled their thoughts and transformed back into human form, landing in front of Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao. The moment they landed, the two of them bowed towards Zhu Yi in unison. "Thank you, Master Yi," Zhu Yi said. "This is my harvest from analyzing the innate divine ability of the primordial sky dragon bloodline. Even though you two still have a long way to go before attaining the body of the sky dragon, obtaining these things in advance and seriously comprehending them will be beneficial to you, especially now that you two are already at the gateway of the undying demon soul. You're in need of higher-level theories and concepts to guide you." Jieyu nodded repeatedly. Just as Master Yi said, us husband and wife should seriously comprehend and cultivate. Be it humans or demons, attaining an essence soul or an undying demon soul meant completely different things. And the difficulty was self-evident. Back when Jieyu had just formed her demon nascent, the nine-clawed Eagle King and the former North Sea Whale King were already at the late-stage Demon King realm. All these years, although the North Sea Whale King had successfully broken through the final barrier, attaining an undying demon soul and obtaining the title of Black Whale Great Sage, the nine-clawed Eagle King was still at the late-stage Demon King realm, unable to take that step. And in fact, if not for him entering Xianmen Tianzong, it was unknown how long the North Sea Whale King would have to work hard to take that step. Although Jieyu and White Light came from the Grand Supreme Dragon Pool, their understanding of the primordial sky dragon was extremely limited due to the legacy of the Grand Supreme Dragon Pool. At this moment, with Zhu Yi's guidance, even if Zhu Yi's understanding of the primordial sky dragon's intent was incomplete, their cultivation would undoubtedly be much smoother. Therefore, Jieyu and White Light were naturally very grateful to Zhu Yi and Xianmen Tianzong. Shi Tianhao smiled as he watched from the side. He glanced at the direction of his cave residence, the desolate sky valley, then looked at Jieyu and said with a smile that was not a smile, "Why is that glutton making a fuss again?" The person he was referring to was, of course, the little Taotai Tunton. Jieyu puffed out his chest in a somewhat smug manner, but the smile on his face looked somewhat sly no matter how one looked at it. She knows this old dragon is about to attain an undying demon soul. So, Shi Tianhao grinned, somewhat gloating, and chuckled with Jieyu. By the side, Zhu Yi and White Light also couldn't help shaking their heads. Tunton had already broken through to the mid-stage Demon King realm, but due to her innate special condition, her cultivation speed was very slow. In truth, her current cultivation speed had already far exceeded expectations. Compared to Jieyu, she had improved even more than expected. Under normal circumstances, it would not be surprising for her to be stuck at the early-stage Demon King realm for hundreds or even thousands of years. Therefore, Tunton was usually very satisfied and carefree, stuffing herself with food. But everything was afraid of comparison. Seeing that Jie Feng, who was previously inferior to her and beaten up by her, had advanced by leaps and bounds, the little Taodai suddenly couldn't bear it any longer. The present Jieyu not only had a higher cultivation level than her, but her strength was also similarly higher. If the two were to fight again, it would be her turn to be beaten up by Jieyu. Now that Jieyu had caught up, she naturally had to rediscuss with Tunton about being oppressed by her back then. If it wasn't for White Light protecting her, Jiefeng would most likely be beaten up once every 3 days and once every 5 days. An eye for an eye, an eye for an eye, an eye for an eye. Shi Tianhao gazed into the distance, seeing Tunton sitting unhappily on a boulder in the desolate Heaven Valley, holding a tree branch and nibbling on a spirit fruit. After I attain an undying demon soul, my cultivation speed will return to normal. At that time, I'll have a good talk with you. At the undying demon soul realm, it was more difficult to improve, and the time needed was naturally longer. Tunton was still confident that it could catch up to Jieyu's speed. Your dragon clan can only achieve the heavenly dragon body in the last days realm. As long as I attain an undying demon soul, I won't be afraid of you at the same level, and can even beat you until you beg for mercy. Tunton mumbled to itself as it took another bite of the spirit fruit, chewing as if to vent its anger. She had transformed into human form and looked to be in her early teens. She still had picturesque features and was beautiful and adorable, but her actions were somewhat evil, and there was no bearing to speak of. "Ani, Ani," a voice sounded from her bosom at this moment. It was a little girl that looked like she had been carved from jade. She was much younger than Tuntin, and although she was in human form, it was still possible to faintly see some profound nether beast features. She was currently pointing at the tree branch in Tuntin's hand as she called out in a childish voice. Tuntin snorted. "How many times have I told you? It's not Ani, it's Grandaunt." The little mysterious nether beast in human form was the Blackwater Mysterious Ming's daughter, Lu Ling Xianming. She blinked her large eyes and looked at Tuntin in a daze, completely unaware of why Tuntin had suddenly grown a generation older. Tuntin said angrily, "Grandaunt is not in a good mood and has no time to deal with you." Although she said this, she still plucked a spirit fruit from the tree branch and carefully peeled off the skin and the core before sending it into little Lu Ling's mouth. The little mysterious nether beast opened its mouth and swallowed the fruit. It immediately beamed with joy and clapped its little hands as it laughed nonstop. Tuntin pursed its lips. "What a picky little girl. I'm not even so picky when I eat." While grumbling, Tuntin peeled another spirit fruit and fed it to Lu Ling Xianming. At the same time, it reached out and made a grabbing motion in the air. Another branch on a fruit tree in the distance broke off and was grabbed by Tuntin. Then it plucked another spirit fruit from it. Due to various considerations, the mysterious underworld race and the Taotai race had unanimously not participated in the war between the two realms. The Taotai Great Sage and the mysterious underworld Great Sage had chosen to stay out of the war and had led their entire race into hiding. Although it was very difficult to really stay out of the war, and other powerful demon races would try to subdue them for their own use, the war between the two realms had started too suddenly, so the Taotai race and the mysterious underworld race had avoided a calamity. Over the years, Tuntin had often traveled around Tianwang, vast mainland. Although it was not on good terms with the Blackwater mysterious underworld being, it got along very well with Lu Ling Xianming. This time, it had even brought Lu Ling Xianming back to Yujing Mountain to play. Xianmin Tianzong had not interfered, and the mysterious underworld race had acquiesced. Little Lu Ling looked at the spirit fruit with his big eyes and clapped his hands with a smile. "Auntie, eat one. Auntie, eat one." Tuntin said helplessly, All right. I'll feed you first before I slowly enjoy it myself." After saying that, it peeled another spirit fruit and was about to send it into Lu Ling's mouth when a huge suction force suddenly came from the side and sucked the spirit fruit away. Tuntin immediately flared up in anger. It turned its head and saw a pair of huge eyes staring back at it. There were huge dark circles around the eyes, and its gaze was innocent and pure. Chapter 1359. In front of Tuntin was a behemoth the size of a hill, with alternating black and white fur. It had a pair of large dark circles around its eyes and looked lazy and listless. Only when its eyes stared at the fruit tree branch in Tuntin's hand would it show some spirit, and it gave Tuntin a simple and honest smile. This was naturally the new resident of the desolate Heaven Valley, a giant panda called Gun Gun. Tuntin had seen him before, but he was usually lazy and didn't like to move. He only ate and slept all day, neither of them interfering with each other's business. Tuntin never imagined that the food that was already at his mouth would be snatched away by this guy. This angered Tuntin so much that it was like a Buddha ascending to the heavens. Under White Light's protection, Jeyu wouldn't hit her, but the old dragon wasn't easy to deal with. He used a non-violent method of revenge. Whenever Tuntin wanted to eat something, he would open his mouth and get it first. Even some of Tuntin's private stash of precious items that he planned to slowly enjoy were swallowed by the old dragon. For Tuntin, this was even more painful than being beaten up, which was why he was in such a bad mood. If White Light hadn't come out to persuade Jeyu to leave, Tuntin would have wanted to kill himself. Now that the old dragon was finally gone, Tuntin could finally breathe a sigh of relief. At the same time, it turned its grief and anger into appetite, preparing to feast to compensate for its wounded heart. Who knew that another one would come to snatch food from her? How could the little Taotai not be devastated? She jumped up with Lu Ling and Xianming in her arms, pointing at Gungun. She was so angry that her entire body was trembling, unable to speak. Gungun's innocent eyes looked at Tuntin as it opened its mouth and gave a simple and honest smile. It suddenly stuck out its tongue and licked the tree branch in Tuntin's hand. A few more spirit fruits on the fruit tree branch in Tuntin's hand disappeared. Well done. Tuntin was so angry that he began to laugh. He looked Raleigh up and down as he viciously thought in his heart, Advanced Demon King cultivation is higher than mine, but from his fat appearance, I'm sure he has never fought with anyone before. How can he surpass me in the use of his own power? Let alone that old dragon bullying me, even a fatty like you came. I can't tolerate this. With such thoughts in mind, Tuntin let out an evil chuckle. It placed little Lu Ling down before pouncing towards Gungun. Raleigh looked at her with a baffled expression, only to see the little Taotai raise one of her hands. Her white and tender palm instantly transformed into a malevolent giant claw, flashing with a cold metallic luster. It clawed towards Raleigh's head. The astral wind around it was as sharp as a blade. Luling Xianming, who was staring blankly at Gungun, couldn't help but exclaim when he saw Tuntin suddenly attack. But soon after, an even more ear-piercing shriek rang out in the desolate Heaven Valley. Tuntin hastily retreated, its giant white gung metal claw swiftly retracting like a person reaching out to grab a flame. Fatty, what's going on? Tuntin was dumbstruck as it stared at the nonchalant Raleigh. In the face of her attack, Raleigh did not do anything else but make a hilarious gesture. It stuck out its tongue and licked Tuntin's claw. It didn't seem to be malicious at all, and instead seemed to be acting coquettishly. But Tuntin was in a miserable state. After devouring the Gung Metal Tiger clan and reconstructing its body, its sturdy and tough claw had directly rotted and several of its claws had melted. Tuntin stared at Raleigh and carefully recalled everything that had happened before. It realized that the fatty saliva specialized in restraining the corrosive attribute of gold and iron. It was one of its innate abilities. After figuring out the trick behind it, Tuntin suddenly had the urge to look up to the sky and cry. Because she had reconstructed her body with the essence and blood of the Gung Metal Tiger, she had obtained physical strength that surpassed ordinary Taotai of the same level. Whether it was offensive or defensive power, she was far superior to her fellow clan members. Coupled with the Taotai clan's innate ability to devour the heavens and earth, she had profited from a disaster, and her strength had risen to a new level. But today it had encountered Raleigh. Its Gung metal body happened to be restrained by the fatty in front of it, which made Tuntin suddenly feel that life was very difficult. She looked at Raleigh with grief and indignation. I was wondering why you came to steal my food. You do have something to rely on, but don't look down on me too much. Tuntin opened its mouth, and a sun-like light rose into the air. Dazzling golden flames shot out in all directions like needles. Torrential true sun fire formed a small sun under Tuntin's control and slowly rose in the desolate Heaven Valley. Little Xianming shrank back at the sight of that thing and cried, "Aunt, bear with it for a while. It will be over soon. Once you get rid of this thing, I will take you to eat delicious food." Tuntin shouted and then controlled the sun to smash towards Raleigh. Raleigh's chubby body sat motionlessly on the spot. It raised its head to look at the descending sun, as if it still didn't understand what was going on. It blinked and shook its head, as if it didn't understand and didn't want to think too much about it. Instead, it opened its mouth and a huge suction force came from it, as if it wanted to swallow the sun. Tuntin felt that this was ridiculous. What was even more ridiculous was that although the true sun fire was constantly sucking in air, as if it was burning its mouth, it was really slowly swallowing the true sun fire. You dare to play this trick in front of my Taotai clan? Tuntin was really angry this time. The anger on its face disappeared, and its expression turned grave. With a roar, it revealed its true form. It had the body of a goat and the face of a human. Its eyes were under its armpits, and it had the teeth of a tiger and claws of a human. Its roar was like the cry of a baby, but it was much sharper and more ear-piercing. Tuntin opened its mouth and displayed the Tautai clan's innate ability to swallow the heavens and devour the earth. Its mouth was like a black hole that erupted with a powerful suction force that could swallow the sun and moon. The sun that was about to be swallowed by Gungun suddenly stopped, and then slowly rose from Gungun's mouth. Raleigh blinked, and the suction force in its mouth grew stronger. The sun formed from the true sun. Fire slowly sank again. Tuntin's eyes widened, and it hurriedly activated its ability. The two Yao clan's mouths were wide open as they competed with the sun. It was an extremely comical sight. However, the onlookers did not find it funny at all, because the two large mouths were like two black holes, constantly devouring everything around them. Aside from the sun, other things seemed to be swept up by the storm and then thrown into the two black holes, being sucked in. In terms of innate ability, the Tautai clan's swallow the heavens and devour the earth ability was indeed superior in this aspect. However, Raleigh's cultivation level was higher, so Tuntin couldn't gain an advantage for a while. However, because Raleigh refused to display its heaven and earth avatar, it couldn't display the most powerful aspect of an advanced demon king. After a long time, Tuntin finally sucked the sun back. Just as Tuntin felt that it had regained some ground and gained the upper hand, Raleigh suddenly shut its mouth. Tuntin, who was still increasing its power, suddenly flashed. If it wasn't for her swallow the heavens and devour the earth race's divine ability, she would have lost control of the sun and almost smashed into her head. You look so simple and adorable, but you're so cunning. You're practically the same as Luo Chinwu. Tuntin was infuriated. It dispersed the true sun fire and turned to look at Gungun, only to find that it was smiling as it lowered its head and gently licked its tongue. The fruit tree branch that had fallen from their battle was sucked into its mouth. Tuntin felt a wave of defeat when it saw this. I've always been competing with this guy. Raleigh swallowed the spirit fruit and raised its head, using its large, innocent eyes to stare at Tuntin. It spoke in a human language that it had just learned and was still not very proficient with. Eat one, and give me another one. Some of the spectating Heaven Desolate Valley disciples looked at Raleigh and then at little Lu Ling before bursting into laughter. Tuntin's face was as black as the bottom of a pot, and it had the urge to cry. It felt that it was extremely stupid just now. She helplessly pointed at the fruit tree in the distance. You're a late-stage demon king after all. You can use your divine sense and demonic power to pluck it. Raleigh rolled its head and said in a somewhat discouraged manner, I can't pluck it. At this moment, a Heaven Desolate Valley disciple sent a voice transmission to Tuntin and said with a smile, Aunt Tuntin, on the first day this guy came, he ate an entire scarlet fire oil pear tree bald. Therefore, Senior Brother Huang and Senior Sister Zhuge had no choice but to invite Mr. Kong over to add some restrictions to the spirit trees and spirit herbs in the valley so that he can't pluck them himself. Whatever he wants to eat, we are the ones who pluck it and feed it to him. Tuntin immediately felt very happy when it heard this. Serves him right. I've never had such a good meal before. However, after feeling happy, Tuntin looked at Raleigh, who was staring at her anxiously. The smile on its face gradually stiffened. You can't be. Raleigh smiled charmingly. Eat one. The two monsters stared at each other. Tuntin let out a shrill cry and turned to run. After running for 2 steps, it suddenly turned back and picked up little Lu Ling from the ground before quickly escaping. However, before she could run far, a huge black shadow flashed in front of her. The giant panda that was like a small mountain once again appeared in front of her and stared at her anxiously. This speed is almost as fast as the 9-clawed Eagle King, right? It feels like he hasn't used his full strength. Tuntin tried a few directions, but was blocked by Raleigh. It wanted to break through the void, but was still unable to escape. It instantly felt like crying. Little Lu Ling lay in Tuntun's embrace and looked at the big guy in front of him with eyes filled with curiosity. He clapped his hands and smiled. Aunt, you're so cute. You little traitor, Tuntun said in a bad mood. Lu Ling said, Aunt, you eat your fruit. Give Lu Ling's fruit to him. Tuntun was helpless. It waved its hand and plucked a few spirit fruits before throwing them to Lu Ling. You can feed him. I don't want to interact with him. Lu Ling carefully passed the spirit fruit to Raleigh. Raleigh gave a silly smile and licked the fruit with its big tongue. It happily swallowed the fruit. Lu Ling liked it very much. She stretched out her pink little hand to touch Raleigh's head. Raleigh did not dodge and allowed little Xianming to stroke its soft fur. It even raised its head and stuck out its tongue to gently and intimately lick little Xianming. Lu Ling was overjoyed. When Tuntun saw this scene, it curled its lips and said, Little traitor. Who knew that Raleigh's tongue would also intimately lick her? A miserable shriek instantly rang out in the desolate sky valley. You, Tuntun glared angrily at Raleigh. Raleigh innocently blinked its eyes as if it did not understand what was happening. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.